Preface. Can you hear it? The whisper of the universe, an ancient melody your soul once danced to, but your mind has long since forgotten. It is a song born not of effort, but of the grace of surrendering to the flow. We've been taught a story, a myth of struggle, a tale that says achievement is born from sweat and pressure, that we must bend the world to our will through relentless effort. We have become master blacksmiths, endlessly hammering away at life, trying to force it into our desired shape, only to find ourselves exhausted, wondering why our masterpieces feel so hollow. But what if there is another way, a path that doesn't ask you to push the river, but simply to learn how to raise your sails? This is the invitation of this book. It is not a new strategy for doing more. It is a sacred permission to simply be. Imagine for a moment that your true power lies not in a clenched fist, but in an open palm. It is not the force of a dam trying to hold back the water, but the power of the ocean, vast and majestic in its own receiving. The universe does not operate through struggle. It operates through harmony. A seed does not try to become an oak tree. It simply allows the blueprint within it to unfold, drawing what it needs from the sun and soil. It simply is an oak tree in every moment of its existence. The journey you are about to embark upon is not one of learning a new skill. It is a journey of remembrance, of remembering the truth encoded in every cell of your being. You are not separate from the creative flow of the universe. You are its expression. When you are constantly doing, you operate from the finite resource of your personal will. But when you learn the art of being a state of intentional receptivity, of still presence, you become a channel. A pure channel for the infinite wisdom, creativity, and power of life itself to flow through you. You shift from an exhausted blacksmith into a master artist, one who allows beauty to pour through them with ease. Letting go is not giving up. It is the ultimate trust. It is the recognition that a greater intelligence is at work, and your task is not to control it, but to cooperate with it. This book holds the key not to a foreign place, but to the door within you, where the truth of your own magnificent, effortless, and powerful nature has always been waiting. Take a deep breath. Let the walls of resistance begin to dissolve. It is time to stop fighting and start flowing. It is time to remember who you truly are. Chapter 1. The Whisper of Stillness. I still vividly remember the long nights spent sitting before a blank page, my mind a roaring tempest. I tried to force the ideas to flow, arranging each word with an almost desperate control. The harder I pushed, the whiter the page became, and the silence in the room grew heavier, mocking my impotence. I believed that results could only come from utter exertion, that I had to conquer this emptiness with my will. But all I received in return was a weary soul and a heart heavy with frustration. It was only when in total exhaustion I surrendered, the pen stepped outside and simply breathed under the night sky, that the first sentence gently came to me. It did not come from struggle. It came from letting go. The story of Elias, the greatest blacksmith in all the land, begins with a similar struggle. Introduction: The Master Blacksmith. In a realm unnamed on any map, where mountains touched the clouds and forests whispered ancient tales, there lived a blacksmith named Elias. His swords were not mere weapons. They were extensions of a warrior's arm. The horseshoes he forged seemed to carry the endurance of the mountains themselves. The sound of Elias's hammer rang through the valley like a symphony of strength and will, and his reputation was built on sweat fire and absolute control over every fiber of the steel. He believed it was his own muscular power and relentless focus that conquered the metal, forcing it to obey his will. The conflict, the impossible task. One day, the Duke of the land sent for Elias with the highest of commissions to forge a ceremonial dagger for his son's coming-of-age ceremony. This was not a weapon for battle, but a symbol of wisdom, balance, and a noble bloodline. It had to sing a song of grace, as the Duke described it. Elias accepted with a burning sense of pride. He chose the most precious steel, stoked his forge hotter than ever, and began his work. But something strange happened. The metal seemed to resist him. The first blade cracked under his mighty blow. The second twisted strangely as if writhing in agony. The third, though technically perfect, felt dead soulless and heavy. Weeks passed. Elias's shoulders slumped with fatigue. His confidence melted like beeswax before the flame. For the first time in his life, his strength and his control had betrayed him. The harder he tried, the more he failed. His hammer was no longer a symphony, but the angry sounds of desperation. He was swimming against an invisible river, and exhaustion was pulling him under. The turning point, the stillness of the forest. Late one afternoon, after another bitter failure, Elias threw his hammer to the ground. He abandoned his dying forge and walked into the ancient forest behind his home, a place he hadn't set foot in since he was a young apprentice. He had no purpose, no plan. He just walked. He sat by a lake as still as a mirror, its surface so calm it reflected every leaf, every wisp of cloud with perfect clarity. He didn't try to think, didn't search for answers. For the first time in weeks, he allowed the silence to envelop him. The noise in his head, the screams of failure and pressure gradually subsided. In its place, he began to hear other sounds, the wind whispering through the leaves, the distant tap, tap, tap of a woodpecker, and above all, the steady beat of his own heart. In that profound stillness, a memory surfaced. He recalled the words of his old master, Elias. "You are not the conqueror of metal. You are its dance partner. You must listen to its song before you ask it to dance to your rhythm." Elias realized he had been trying to shout over the steel's song with the clamor of his hammer. He had been trying to control the river instead of letting it guide him. The resolution, the melody of steel. Elias returned to his forge as dusk fell. But there was a difference. The tension had left his shoulders. The peace of the forest seemed to have followed him home. He stoked the fire not with haste, but with reverence. He placed the steel in the flames and looked at it not as an enemy to be subdued, but as a partner. He waited. He listened. He felt for the subtle shifts in its color and heat. When he lifted the steel out, his hammer blows had changed. They were no longer forceful, angry strikes. They became rhythmic, precise taps, like a conductor guiding his orchestra. He wasn't forcing, he was coaxing. He wasn't commanding, he was inviting. He was dancing with the metal. And under those gentle blows, the dagger took shape. It was perfect. It was light yet firm, simple yet radiating nobility. When Elias held it, he could feel a faint, living vibration in his palm. It was singing. When the Duke received the dagger, he was silent for a long moment, not inspecting the craftsmanship, but feeling its spirit. "This is not the work of a blacksmith," he said. "This is the work of a poet." Years later, when I was struggling to mend a relationship on the brink of collapse, I remembered Elias's story. I had been trying to fix things with words, with plans, with analyses of right and wrong. I tried to control the other person's emotions, to steer the conversation my way. But just like Elias and the steel, the relationship only grew more strained and distant. The exhaustion returned to envelop me. And then I stopped. I stopped talking, stopped planning. In our next meeting, I simply fell silent and listened. Not the silence of waiting for my turn to speak, but a spacious, open silence, a safe space for the other person to truly give voice to their heart. In that stillness, understanding began to sprout. The healing came not from my efforts, but from the peaceful space I had allowed to exist. The universal law of creation is born from stillness. Through these stories, a universal law is revealed. True power and creation are born not from forceful struggle, but from allowing in stillness. The universe was not created from a loud bang, but from an infinite silence that held all potential. Life in its natural course is like a river. You can choose to swim against the current, flailing in desperation and burning out. Or you can learn to let go, trust the flow, and allow it to carry you to places you've never dreamed of. Our exhaustion comes not from the work, but from our resistance to that flow. Silence is not emptiness. It is the fertile ground where the seeds of ideas, healing, and brilliant solutions await the right conditions to sprout. When you stop trying to control everything, you open the door for the greatest opportunities to find you. The deepest wisdom does not shout for attention. It whispers in the moments you allow yourself to be still. Practice the sacred pause. To connect with this power, you don't need to retreat into a deep forest or face an impossible task. You only need to practice the sacred pause in your daily life. Several times a day, especially when you feel stressed, stuck, or overwhelmed. Do this. Stop whatever you are doing, just pause. Close your eyes, gently close your eyelids. Breathe. Take a deep breath in, feeling the air fill your chest. Then exhale slowly, releasing all tension. Repeat 3 times. Listen to the silence. Don't try to empty your mind. Simply become aware of the silence that lies beneath all your thoughts. Imagine it like a still lake underneath the ripples on the surface. Sit for 1 minute. Just 1 minute. No purpose, no expectations. Simply be in that moment of stillness. By practicing these brief pauses, you are creating space for the whisper of your inner wisdom to be heard. You are learning to dance with the river instead of fighting it. And in that stillness, you will find the strength to create your most extraordinary work. Chapter 2. Declaring a ceasefire with life. For years, I lived as if I were in an endless race for which I myself had fired the starting gun. Every morning was a rush into battle, a battle against time, a battle against expectations, a battle against the feeling of never being enough. I believed that if I just pushed a little harder, controlled things a little more tightly, I would finally achieve victory. But that victory never came. Instead, anxiety gnawed at my soul like a corrosive acid. Every small obstacle on my path became a personal enemy. It was only when I was stuck in traffic one rainy afternoon, my heart hammering with rage and helplessness, that it suddenly hit me my fury wasn't making a single car move faster. It was only burning me up from the inside. In that moment, I did something different. I leaned back in my seat, turned off the noisy news station, and put on a gentle instrumental track. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "Okay, I am here. I accept this." The traffic hadn't moved, but the war inside me was over. And for the first time that day, I felt peace. The story of Knight Kalen, the guardian of the Frostfang Pass, is a powerful testament to the strength found in declaring a ceasefire with life itself. Introduction: The Warrior of Control. On the northern frontier of the realm, where the peaks were perpetually crowned with snow, there was a treacherous pass known as Frostfang Pass. Its guardian was Knight Kalen, a man whose discipline was forged from iron and ice. For Kalen, life was a constant war. He fought the blizzards that sought to bury the road, he fought the loose rocks that threatened to fall, and he fought the ghosts of invaders who might emerge from the mists. His philosophy was simple: order could only be maintained through ceaseless vigilance and control. Every day he and his men patrolled, cleared, and fortified. He saw every falling snowflake as a potential enemy, every howling wind as a declaration of war. He was praised throughout the lands for his dedication, a guardian who never rested. But deep down, Kalen's soul was as cold and harsh as the land he governed. The conflict. The war against winter. Then came a winter more brutal than any in living memory. Snow fell without end, turning Frostfang Pass into a white, deadly labyrinth. Instead of backing down, Kalen escalated his war. He ordered his men to work double time, fighting for every inch of ground, erecting barriers against the wind. He believed that with absolute willpower, he could conquer winter itself. But the universe does not respond to struggle. It responds to the frequency you emit. And Kalen was broadcasting a frequency of war. The more he resisted, the fiercer nature became. A supply wagon was trapped and buried in the snow. His men, exhausted and demoralized, began to fall ill. The barriers he built were torn apart by the wind. Kalen felt he was losing a battle against an enemy he couldn't see. The control he had always prided himself on was slipping through his fingers like sand. The outer chaos was a perfect mirror of the raging war within his own mind. The turning point, the lesson of the oak. One night, the most terrible blizzard of all descended. Kalen, while inspecting a distant outpost, became lost. The wind howled like a hungry beast, and the snow whipped his face, blinding him. Exhausted and desperate, he found shelter in a small, abandoned stone chapel built centuries ago by pilgrims. Inside, the silence was nearly absolute. The roaring wind muffled by the thick stone walls. There was nothing left to do, nothing left to fight. For the first time in his life, Kalen was forced to surrender. In the faint light of his oil lamp, he saw a simple fresco on the wall. It depicted a giant, ancient oak tree in the dead of winter. Its branches were heavy with white snow, bending gracefully under the weight. And a profound truth struck Kalen. The oak tree did not fight the snow. It did not try to flex its muscles to shrug the snow off. It accepted, it held, and it bent. Its strength lay not in resistance, but in yielding. The oak remained standing, not by opposing winter, but by becoming a part of it. Kalen realized he had been trying to be a stone wall against an avalanche, instead of learning from the wisdom of the oak. His war was not with winter. His war was with reality itself. The resolution: peace with the past. When the storm broke, Kalen emerged from the chapel. The sky was clear and the air was still, but the man who walked out was not the same man who had walked in. The war within him had ended. He returned to his men, but not with new orders to fight. Instead, he told them of the oak tree. He ordered them to stop the hopeless clearing of snow. Instead, they learned to read its flow, finding the safest paths that winter itself had created. They stopped fighting the cold and focused on reinforcing their shelters, staying warm and sharing stories around the fire. They had ceased their war with the past, and a miracle occurred. As they stopped broadcasting the frequency of struggle, the chaos itself seemed to subside. The men's spirits lifted. They found a new rhythm, a harmony with the land. The past was still dangerous, but it was no longer an enemy. By laying down his arms, Kalen had found a far greater power, the power of allowing. He had discovered that the river of life, or the flow of winter, has its own wisdom. And it will always carry you to safety if you stop struggling and trust it. I applied this same lesson when facing a chronic health issue. My first reaction was to declare war on my own body. I treated it like a traitor, a battlefield to be conquered with strict diets, aggressive treatments, and an iron will. But just like Kalen fighting the winter, the more I fought, the more my body protested with worse symptoms. I was broadcasting a frequency of conflict, and my body was responding in kind. The healing only truly began when I declared a ceasefire. I started listening to my body instead of commanding it. I started nourishing it instead of punishing it. I shifted from a frequency of opposition to a frequency of acceptance and love. And in that peace, my body began its own process of healing. The universal law, the frequency of acceptance. The lesson here is a foundational truth of existence. The universe doesn't respond to your strenuous actions. It responds to your inner frequency. When you are in a state of resistance, anxiety, or control, you are broadcasting a frequency of lack and conflict. And the universe, like a giant mirror, will reflect back to you more situations to be anxious and conflicted about. Peace is not something you win after a battle. Peace is your natural state, the calm ocean that is always there beneath the turbulent waves of the mind. Ending the inner war is not an act of weakness, but an admission of a higher power. It is the recognition that the river of life knows where it is going. True strength lies not in gripping the wheel tighter, but in trusting the journey. Practice the ritual of laying down arms to shift your frequency from resistance to allowing. Perform this symbolic ritual. This is more than a simple act. It is a powerful declaration to the universe of your willingness to change. Identify your war. Be honest with yourself. What are you fighting against in your life? A job you hate, a strained relationship, a financial situation, a health problem. Name your enemy. Choose your symbol. Find a small object that can represent your battle. It could be a small stone, a piece of paper on which you write your problem and then crumple up, or a dry twig. Declare your ceasefire. Hold the object in your hand. Feel the weight of this war. Then say these words or similar words from your heart aloud and with conviction. I declare a ceasefire. I end my war with name of your war. I lay down my arms. I release the need to control the outcome. I trust the flow of life and allow peace to find me. Release. Now purposefully release the object. You can throw it into a river, bury it in the earth, or simply set it down somewhere and walk away without looking back. This physical act reinforces your inner decision. It is your signal that you are ready to stop swimming upstream. You are choosing peace. And from that space of peace, you will watch as life begins to open up new paths in ways that struggle never could. Chapter 3. When effort becomes the obstacle. I remember vividly the period when my career seemed to hit a dead end. The fear of an uncertain future became my constant companion. Fueled by that silent panic, I threw myself into my work like a madman. I sent hundreds of emails, made countless calls, and networked with anyone who would listen. Every action I took screamed the same message: I need this. I have to make this happen. My energy was a chaotic mix of urgency and desperation, and the universe responded in kind. One door after another slammed shut. The silence I received was more deafening than any rejection. It was my own desperate striving, born from a place of fear, that had unintentionally erected an invisible wall blocking the very opportunities I craved. It wasn't until I was utterly exhausted and surrendered that I finally stopped. I decided to focus only on the work I had in front of me with all the appreciation and joy I could muster. And then, as if by magic, a wonderful offer found its way to me from a direction I had never anticipated. The story of Alaric, a young winemaker, offers a profound lesson on this very trap of effort when it is rooted in fear, the set-up aspiration among the vines. In a sun-kissed valley where grapevines had clung to the earth for generations, lived a young winemaker named Alaric. He had inherited a renowned but fading vineyard. A burning desire roared in Alaric's heart to create a wine so exquisite it would earn the royal seal, an honor that would not only bring wealth, but also revitalize his family's legacy. He had the knowledge, the skill, and an iron will, the tension, the war against the land. As the season began, the fear of failure became Alaric's fuel. He became obsessed with controlling everything. He believed that only through relentless intervention and back-breaking labor could he force the grapes to achieve perfection. He pruned the vines mercilessly, terrified they wouldn't get enough sun. He watered them incessantly, terrified they would wither. He tested the soil's pH daily, adding a cocktail of minerals in a desperate attempt to engineer the ideal environment. Alaric's energy was one of anxiety. He wasn't nurturing the vineyard, he was waging war on it. And the land, as if sensing his tension, responded. Instead of thriving, the leaves began to show hints of yellow. The young grape clusters were small and stunted, as if recoiling from his suffocating care. The elder winemakers in the village would shake their heads, whispering that Alaric was fighting the earth. His own relentless striving had become the greatest obstacle to his dream harvest. The shift. The listening land. One evening, after discovering yet another row of weakening vines, Alaric felt completely defeated. He dropped his tools and wandered to a forgotten corner of the vineyard, a small wild patch his grandfather had called the listening land. He collapsed to the ground, too drained to plan or analyze any further, and in that stillness, he began to allow. He allowed himself to just sit. He didn't try to find a solution, he simply observed. He saw the weeds growing freely, the bees buzzing diligently, and the evening breeze gently rustling the leaves. The words of his late grandfather echoed in his mind. Alaric, the wine is already in the grape. Your work isn't to create it, but to allow it to be expressed. It was an epiphany. He had been trying to shout his own instructions instead of listening to the song of the earth. He had been trying to force an outcome instead of creating the space for magic to unfold. His striving, fueled by fear, had silenced the vineyard's natural wisdom, the resolution space for divine timing. The next day, Alaric returned to his vineyard with a completely different energy. The panic had been replaced by a quiet trust. He stopped his obsessive meddling. Instead, each morning he would simply walk among the vines, placing a hand on their trunks, feeling their life force. He learned to trust the natural cycles of sun and rain. He was no longer a general commanding an army, but a humble partner with nature, and the vineyard responded. As if breathing a collective sigh of relief, the vines began to revive. The leaves grew greener, the grapes began to swell, not because of his intervention, but because of his permission. That autumn, Alaric harvested the most extraordinary grapes. They weren't the largest, but they held an unusual complexity and depth. The wine he crafted from them not only won the royal seal, but was praised as a wine that had a soul. Alaric hadn't succeeded by doing more, but by stepping back and trusting. He created an empty space, and in that space, divine timing went to work, delivering a result more brilliant than anything he had dared to dream. This same paradoxical truth once manifested in my love life. For a long time, I was actively searching for a partner. I had a checklist of criteria, a detailed plan for meeting people, and a tireless dedication to dating. But every encounter felt tainted with the energy of an interview. My "I need to find someone" vibe unintentionally pushed people away. The shift only came when I decided to stop searching. I stepped back. I focused on becoming a happy and whole version of myself, finding joy in my own independence. I created a space of allowance in my life. And in that very space, when I was no longer looking, my partner appeared in the most natural and effortless way. The universal law, the quality of your energy matters more than the intensity of your labor. This is one of the most subtle yet powerful laws of the universe. Action born from fear creates resistance. Action born from trust creates allowance. The universe doesn't measure how hard you struggle. It doesn't reward you for sleepless nights or anxious sweat. It responds to the clarity and purity of your energetic frequency. A single action taken with a peaceful, trusting heart has more creative power than 1,000 efforts made in desperation. Sometimes your meticulous plans, complex strategies, and relentless striving are the very things standing between you and what you desire. When you try to control every variable, you leave no room for serendipity, for the universe's wisdom, or for divine timing. Letting go of control isn't passive resignation. It is a deliberate act of faith, a declaration that you trust in a greater power at work. Practice taking a step back. Here is a practice to experience the power of creating space and shifting the quality of your energy. Identify the striving, pinpoint an area in your life where you feel you are straining or forcing an outcome. This could be a work project, a financial goal, or a personal change. Acknowledge the fear. Articulate the underlying fear driving your actions. For example, I'm pushing to finish this project because I'm afraid I'll be seen as incompetent, or I'm trying so hard to make money because I'm terrified of the feeling of scarcity. The act of stepping back. Commit to a specific period, it could be one afternoon or a full weekend, to take a step back. During this time, promise yourself you will not take any action toward that goal that comes from a place of fear or pressure. No rushed emails, no obsessive checking of progress. Recharge your energy. Instead, use this time to do something that nourishes your soul and cultivates a sense of trust and peace. This could be walking in a park, listening to your favorite music, playing with a pet, or reading an inspiring book. The goal is to shift your frequency from anxiety to trust. Observe. After that period, simply observe. How do you feel? Did any new ideas surface gently? Did a different perspective on the problem emerge? This exercise isn't about solving the problem instantly, but about practicing the art of allowing and witnessing that. When you stop pushing, solutions often find their way to you. Chapter 4. The Wisdom of Water. I once faced a complex problem at work, an obstacle that seemed utterly immovable. My warrior-like instinct was to confront it head-on. I summoned all my willpower, working day and night, trying to smash that boulder with brute force and logic, but the boulder wouldn't budge. On the contrary, the harder I pushed, the more exhausted and bruised I became. My creativity dried up and the joy in my work vanished, replaced by the heavy burden of failure. One late afternoon, in total defeat, I left it all behind and went for a walk by a small stream. I watched how the water met a large rock in its path. It didn't stop to fight. It didn't roar in anger. It simply divided, flowed gently around both sides, and rejoined on the other, continuing its journey as if nothing had happened. And then it hit me. I had been trying to be the rock when I should have been the water. The story of Lord Valerius, a master builder, is a timeless lesson on the power that comes from flexibility and yielding. The setup, the conqueror of landscapes. In all the kingdom, no one could rival Lord Valerius in the art of building bridges. His creations were monuments to the human will, arrogant straight lines of stone and iron that defied and conquered any landscape. Valerius's philosophy was one of control. He believed nature was a chaotic force to be subdued, and his bridges were testaments to that dominion. He saw rivers not as lifelines, but as obstacles to be disciplined and contained. The tension, the showdown at Whispering Gorge. Valerius was given the greatest commission of his life, to build a bridge across the Whispering Gorge, a treacherous chasm with a wild and unpredictable river. Brimming with pride, he designed his most magnificent bridge yet, an absolute straight line of colossal stone blocks, a declaration of man's strength over nature. But the river seemed to have a mind of its own. It refused to be tamed. Valerius ordered his workers to dig deeper foundations and erect stronger pillars, but the river answered with unexpected floods, washing their efforts away. Underground currents he hadn't accounted for stealthily eroded the foundations. The bridge, his symbol of control, was being swallowed by chaos. Valerius saw this as a personal insult. He would not accept defeat. He ordered his men to work twice as hard, to use more materials, to fight more fiercely. But the more he tried to impose his rigid will upon the river, the more failure he courted. His strict control had made the building ground, barren, and resistant. He was trying to be a fortress wall, forgetting that water can wear away even stone. The shift. The sermon of the stream. One day, after a primary pillar was severely damaged, a dejected Valerius walked away from the noisy construction site. He followed a small stream upstream, a tributary of the great river. He walked and walked, simply observing. He saw how this tiny stream moved. It didn't try to smash the large rocks. It simply glided around them. It didn't fight the slope of the hill. It happily meandered along it. With quiet persistence over thousands of years, it had carved its own path, a path not of force, but of flexibility. Finally, Valerius came to a waterfall cascading into a clear pool. There he saw the true power of water, not in confrontation, but in constant yielding flow. He recognized his mistake. He had tried to command the river instead of listening to its story. He had tried to impose a straight line on a world that was made of curves. The resolution, the dance of the bridge and the river. Valerius returned and did the unthinkable. He scrapped the entire design. His team and the royal court thought he had gone mad. The new design was a revelation. Instead of a rigid straight line, the new bridge had gentle curves, mimicking the very flow of the river below. The pillars were no longer square to fight the current, but were shaped like the sleek bodies of fish, designed to welcome and channel the flow in harmony. The new bridge was no longer a conqueror, but a dance partner to the river. The construction became astonishingly smooth. It was as if the river itself supported the project. When completed, the bridge was not only stronger than any before it, but it was a marvel of beauty, a perfect fusion of nature and human ingenuity. Lord Valerius had learned his most important lesson: yielding is not weakness, it is the highest form of wisdom. By relinquishing rigid control, he became a channel for the water's wisdom to express itself through him. This lesson also helped me navigate powerful emotions like grief. There was a time I tried to control my sadness, building dams of logic to hold it back. I told myself to be strong, not to cry, not to be weak. But just like Valerius's dam, the pressure built and built until it finally burst in an uncontrollable breakdown. It was only when I learned the wisdom of water that I gave myself permission to be sad. I allowed the tears to flow, allowing the emotion to run its course through me without judgment. And like a river, when allowed to flow freely, the sadness eventually found its way to the great sea, leaving behind a sense of peace and clarity. The universal law becoming a conduit for the flow. The truth revealed here is one of existence's most beautiful secrets. The greatest power lies not in resistance, but in yielding to the flow. Life, like water, always seeks its own path. When you try to impose your rigid will upon it, you create blockages and conflict. But when you learn to be flexible, pliable, and persistent like water, you become unstoppable. Creativity, joy, and abundance cannot be forced. They are natural currents. They are extinguished by the pressure of control, but they gush forth powerfully when you become a pure channel for them. Your goal is not to direct the river of life, but to become the river itself. By removing the inner boulders, fear, judgment, the need for control, you allow the universe's energy to flow through you completely. Remember, a field that is over-controlled becomes barren. Sometimes life's unexpected floods are what bring the most fertile silt, preparing the ground for harvest you never dared to imagine. Practice the flow exercise. To practice the wisdom of water in your daily life, try this simple exercise whenever you feel yourself colliding with a problem. Identify the boulder, recognize a problem or situation in your life where you feel stuck, where you are trying to use force to solve it without success. Recognize the rigidity. Pay attention to your approach. Are you trying to smash the boulder? Do you feel angry or frustrated by its very existence? Acknowledge that. Ask the water question. Ask yourself this simple question: if I were water, what would I do with this boulder? Water would not fight. Water would flow around it, seep slowly underneath it, or simply wait. This question shifts your mindset from confrontation to navigation. Take a flowing action. Based on your answer, take one small, gentle, and flexible action. It might be to temporarily set the problem aside and work on something easier. It might be to change your perspective on the issue. Or it might be to simply accept the boulder's presence for now and stop wasting energy on it. The purpose of this exercise is to train your flexibility muscle to learn how to feel and move with the current of life instead of constantly trying to fight against it. Chapter 5. The Eloquence of Silence. I used to walk into important negotiations armed with an arsenal of words. I would meticulously prepare every argument, anticipate every counterpoint, and believe that if I just spoke eloquently and persuasively enough, I would win. I'd enter the meeting room heart pounding and begin to broadcast, presenting, explaining, debating. But the more I talked, the more I felt the connection between myself and the other person grow thin. My words, no matter how logical, were just noise bouncing off an invisible wall. My energy was anxiety masked by a feigned confidence. Later I learned a different way. Before a crucial meeting, instead of preparing my words, I would prepare my inner silence. I would sit quietly, finding a place of peace and stability within. I would enter the room with a calm, grounded energy. I listened more than I spoke, and I discovered something miraculous. My peaceful presence was more persuasive than any speech. People weren't moved by what I said. They felt who I was. The story of Emissary Alara and the Mountain Lord is a powerful testament to this truth. The setup, the emissary of eloquence. Emissary Alara was the jewel of her fiefdom. She possessed a razor-sharp intellect and a talent for rhetoric that could make stone flowers bloom. Alara believed in the power of the spoken word. She believed that any conflict could be resolved, any hardened heart could be softened, if only one could find the right words to say, the right arguments to present. To her, language was the ultimate tool for shaping reality. The tension words before the mountain's silence. A terrible drought was strangling Alara's homeland. Their only hope lay in the neighboring mountain kingdom, where a great reservoir was ruled by a reclusive and mysterious lord. It was rumored that this lord was immune to all words, whether flattery, threats, or logic. Alara was sent on this near impossible mission. She prepared the most impassioned speech of her life. She spoke of the common good, of compassion, of the future perils if her land perished. She stood in the Lord's vast silent hall and began her oration. Her voice echoed, full of passion and reason. She spoke without pause, pouring out everything she had prepared until she was utterly spent. The Mountain Lord simply sat and listened in silence, his face as placid as a waveless lake. When Alara finished, he said softly, "Madam, your words are like dry leaves in the wind. They make much noise, but they bring no rain." And her plea was denied. The shift becoming the prayer. Alara was heartbroken. For the first time in her life, her greatest strength had been rendered completely useless. That night, unable to sleep, she wandered into a stone courtyard within the fortress. Under the moonlight, she saw an ancient tree growing robustly from a crack in a rock. There was no soil, no one to tend to it. There was only a vibrant presence, a silent affirmation of existence. There were no words there, no pleas, just life. It was an epiphany. Alara realized she had come to demand, to take something with her words. She had tried to persuade instead of connect. Her entire being radiated an energy of lack and desperation. Sitting under the ancient tree, Alara did something different. She didn't craft a new speech. She simply fell silent. She breathed the clean mountain air. She listened to the great stillness around her. She let go of her desire, let go of her desperation, and simply existed. She allowed the peace and solidity of the mountain to permeate her being. She stopped saying the prayer and started becoming the prayer for harmony. The resolution, the universe responds. The next morning, as Alara prepared to leave, the Lord summoned her once more. She entered the great hall, but as a completely different person. She did not bow her head like a beggar, nor did she hold it high in defiance. She was simply present, carrying the stillness of the mountain in her eyes. She did not say a word. She just looked at the Lord in silence and respect. The Lord regarded her for a long moment. Then a faint smile touched his lips. "Yesterday you brought me noise," he said. "Today you bring presence." The mountain understands this language. He agreed to release the water from the reservoir. Alara had succeeded not because of what she said, but because of who she had become. Her harmonious presence was more powerful than 1,000 words. She had learned that the universe doesn't respond to words, it responds to resonance. I learned this lesson in my most intimate moments as well. When a loved one was in pain, my first reaction used to be to try and fix it with words, "Don't be sad. Everything will be okay. You should do this." But those words were just pebbles thrown into a turbulent lake, creating more disturbance. True help only came when I learned to be silent. I would just sit beside them, saying nothing, offering a steady and accepting presence. My silence said, I am here with you. You are not alone. That resonance of peace and acceptance was a more powerful healing balm than any piece of advice. The universal law, the language of resonance. The core truth of this chapter is the true language of the universe. The universe does not respond to your words. It responds to the vibrational state of your being. Your requests, pleas, and complaints are just surface frequencies. The universe listens deeper. It feels the energy field emanating from your core. Who you are in a given moment is infinitely more important than what you say. When you stop broadcasting your demands out into the world, you create the necessary silence to receive messages and guidance from the universe. Silence is not emptiness. It is the portal of reception. Instead of trying to say a prayer, practice becoming the prayer. If you desire peace, become an embodiment of peace. If you desire love, become an embodiment of love. By holding an intention in your heart and allowing it to resonate silently throughout your entire being, you are attuning yourself to the frequency of what you desire. You are turning yourself into a living prayer, an energetic magnet that the universe cannot help but respond to. Practice silent resonance. This is a profound practice for shifting from asking to becoming, for speaking the true language of the universe. Distill your intention. Think of something you wish to invite into your life. Peace, creativity, abundance, healing. Instead of a long sentence, distill it into a single word, a core feeling. For example, peace. Find the feeling. Close your eyes. Don't repeat the word peace in your head. Instead, ask yourself, what does peace actually feel like in my body? Recall a moment you have felt it or imagine it vividly. What does that feeling sense like in your chest, your shoulders, your breath? Become the vessel. For 3 to 5 minutes, simply sit and allow yourself to be the vessel that contains this feeling. There is nothing to do. Just breathe and let the feeling of peace expand, filling every cell. Imagine your entire being gently vibrating at the frequency of peace. Carry the resonance. When you finish, open your eyes and go about your day. Don't try to hold on to or analyze the feeling. Simply trust that you have set a new resonance. You have sent the clearest, most powerful, and most silent signal to the universe. Practice this daily. You are learning to communicate in the language of silence, presence, and resonance. You are learning to become the answer to your own prayer. Chapter 6. Reclaiming Power in the Sanctuary of Silence. Every morning I used to begin my day with an unconscious ritual, reaching for my phone. Before I could even listen to the sound of my own breath, I was plunged into a deluge of emails demanding my attention, headlines screaming of crisis, social media notifications about the lives of others. Every single ping was an invisible thread pulling my mind off center. I became busy reacting to everything, but not truly in command of anything. I had all the information in the world at my fingertips, but I had lost my clarity. Wisdom did not come from that stream. Wisdom was drowning in it. It was only when I dared to do something that seemed insane, turning off all my devices for a few hours each day, that I realized true power comes not from connecting with the world, but from daring to disconnect from it in order to reconnect with your own soul. The story of Duke Theron and his difficult decision is a lesson in finding one's inner compass. In the midst of a storm of noise, the setup, the Duke of Diligence. Duke Theron was a dedicated ruler. He believed that a wise leader was a well-informed leader. Therefore, his great hall was a perpetual open door. Every day was a ceaseless flow of messengers, bearing news, scholars reading endless reports, advisors engaging in heated debates, and citizens bringing countless petitions. He listened to them all. He prided himself on his diligence and his accessibility, believing that by collecting every piece of the puzzle, he would always see the complete picture and make the right decision. The tension drowning in the stream of information. Then a complex crisis struck. A strange plague was devastating the crops in the west, while at the same time a minor border dispute in the east suddenly escalated in a dangerous way. Theron's intuition told him the two events were related, but he couldn't see the connection. He did what he had always done. He gathered more information. He summoned more experts, listened to more reports. But this time the noise became overwhelming. One advisor claimed the plague was a natural disaster. Another blamed a curse. One messenger reported the border dispute was a simple misunderstanding. The next insisted an invasion was imminent. Duke Theron was lost in a sea of contradictory information. The more opinions he gathered, the more hesitant and paralyzed he became. The curtain of noise he had painstakingly woven to find wisdom was now the very thing obscuring it. The system designed to serve him was now profiting from his distraction, pulling him further and further away from his own inner compass. The shift. The sanctuary in the old tower. On the brink of chaos, about to make a decision that could plunge his entire domain into disaster, Theron suddenly remembered the words of his paternal aunt, a retired duchess known for her quiet wisdom. Theron, she had once told him, the answer isn't in the scrolls. It's in the silence the scrolls have stolen from you. Heeding the call of that memory, Theron did something unprecedented. He ordered everyone to leave the Great Hall. He put his advisors on leave, barred all messengers at the gates, and retreated by himself to a forgotten ancient tower in a corner of the castle. He gave a single command for 3 days. No one was to disturb him for any reason whatsoever. He had intentionally created a sanctuary of silence. The resolution, the voice of the soul. The first day in the tower was torture. The noise of the debates and petitions still echoed in his head like ghosts, but Theron persisted. By the second day, the sounds began to subside. On the morning of the 3rd day, when he awoke, there was only a profound and pure stillness, and in that deep silence the answer arrived. It came not as a voice, but as a sudden seeing, a knowing from deep within his soul. He saw with perfect clarity that a greedy lord on the border had secretly dammed a vital stream for his own gain, causing the plague in the west, while simultaneously inflating the border dispute to divert attention. The solution appeared simple and obvious, a truth that no single report could have ever revealed. Duke Theron emerged from the tower exuding a new calm and authority. He didn't need to debate. He simply issued 2 brief, precise orders that resolved both problems at their root. He had learned that his greatest source of power came not from connecting with every voice outside, but from connecting deeply with the silence within. From that day forward, he established a new tradition. 1 day a week, the Great Hall would be closed, dedicated to silence, an act of reclaiming power not just for himself, but for all who served under him. In my own life, I have also sought answers for major turning points by consuming countless books, courses, and external advice. I tried to fill my uncertainty with the noise of other people's knowledge, but it only left me more confused. True direction only emerged when I stopped consuming and started creating space. I began taking time each day to walk in the park, with no phone and no music. In that silence, amidst the rustling of leaves and the sound of my own breath, my deepest desires and my true path gradually revealed themselves, not from an external source, but from my own soul, the universal law, disconnect to reconnect. This is a vital law of our time. True power is reclaimed when you dare to disconnect from the world's noise in order to reconnect with the soul's silence. The outside world is engineered to capture your most precious asset, your attention. Every notification, every headline, every status update is an attempt to pull you from your center of inner authority. Your power does not lie in those connections. It lies within, always there, needing no recharging, no software updates, only to be listened to. Silence is not emptiness or escapism. It is the greatest teacher. It is the sacred space where truth has a chance to surface where solutions to the most complex problems can find their way to you. Your intentional creation of these sanctuaries of silence is the most powerful declaration of sovereignty. It is your way of telling the universe, my inner peace and wisdom are more important than any distraction. Practice the sanctuary ritual. To begin reclaiming your inner power, practice this simple yet transformative ritual. Define your sanctuary. Choose a specific time and space you can commit to regularly. It doesn't have to be grand. It could be the first 15 minutes of your morning in a favorite chair, or 30 minutes during your lunch break in a quiet corner of a park. Establish the sacred boundary. The most important rule of this sanctuary is this: all technological noise is forbidden. Turn your phone off or put it in airplane mode. No computer, no TV, no podcasts, no newspapers. This is your refuge from the stream of information. The non-doing practice. Inside your sanctuary, there is no goal to accomplish. You don't need to meditate correctly or think positive thoughts. You can just sit quietly, look out a window, sip a cup of tea, or simply breathe. The only action is to not consume external information. Create allowance. By regularly entering this space, you are sending a powerful message to your subconscious and your soul. You are saying, I am here, I am listening, this space is for you. Don't desperately search for answers, just create the silence and the answers will find you when the time is right. This is not a luxury, it is an essential act for survival and for thriving in the modern world. It is how you take back your power, one silent moment at a time. Chapter 7. The Power of a Seed Sown in Silence. I once had a big dream, a project I held in my heart with all my passion. And what was the first thing I did? I told everyone. I shared it on social media. I presented it to my friends. I sought approval and words of encouragement. At first, that feedback felt like a stimulant. It made me feel exhilarated. But then a strange thing happened. The initial creative fire inside me began to dim. The energy that should have been used to build and nurture was instead dissipated outward through my words. I had received the reward, the validation, before I had even done the work. And that project, like a tree shown off in the wind too soon, never managed to grow strong roots. Years later, with another dream, I did the opposite. I kept it to myself. I nurtured it in silence, taking the first steps in secret. And I discovered an extraordinary power. My entire energy became focused, like a laser beam, creating an unstoppable momentum. The story of Lyra and the Moonflower is a lesson on the sanctity of cultivating in the dark. The setup. The keeper of the last seed. In a kingdom where magic was fading, there was a legendary flower called the Moonflower. It was said that its silver light could heal any illness. But a century had passed since the last Moonflower had withered. All that remained were a few ancient, dormant seeds, entrusted to Lyra, a young herbalist priestess. Her mission was a sacred burden to make those seeds sprout and save her ailing queen. The tension, the greenhouse of scrutiny. With a pure heart and a belief that collective energy would help, Lyra announced her mission to the entire kingdom. A magnificent greenhouse was erected where all could come to watch and pray. But her good intentions quickly turned into a prison of expectation. Every day, Lyra worked under the scrutiny of hundreds of eyes. Nobles offered hollow advice. Scholars debated her methods. The common folk whispered rumors and worries. The atmosphere in the greenhouse grew heavy with the weight of impatience. Driven by this pressure, Lyra constantly disturbed the soil to check on the seeds desperate for a sign of life. She measured, analyzed, and tried to control every element, but the seeds remained dormant. The earth seemed to grow barren under the weight of observation. The creative energy, instead of being focused, was scattered by the thousand intentions and fears of the crowd. Lyra had forgotten a fundamental truth. A seed needs the quiet of the earth to sprout, not the glare of the stage. The shift. The Covenant in the Secret Cave. In her desperation, Lyra fell into a fitful sleep and had a dream. She saw the moonflower in full bloom, not in the brilliant greenhouse, but in the deep darkness of a damp cave, its light radiating from within. She awoke with a soul-shaking insight. She understood. The moonflower's power didn't come from the outside, it came from within. It didn't need an audience, it needed a sanctuary. Lyra made an audacious decision. She announced that the seeds had died and had the greenhouse dismantled, much to everyone's disappointment. But secretly, she had kept the last seeds. That night she took them to a small cave, hidden behind a waterfall, a place known only to her. This was an act of sowing in pure faith. The resolution growth in the darkness. Inside the cave, Lyra's role changed. She was no longer an anxious commander, but a silent guardian. She no longer dug up the earth to check on her progress. Instead, she sat in the silence, sending her energy of faith and patience into the dark soil. She told no one of her actions. It became a sacred covenant, a powerful secret between her and the universe. She simply allowed. She created a safe space, trusting completely in the unseen process. And in that protected stillness, the miracle occurred. A week later, a tiny, strong green sprout pierced the dark soil. It grew quickly in the darkness, nourished by the silence and Lyra's unwavering faith. Soon, the moonflower bloomed its petals, emitting a gentle silver light that filled the cave with a healing energy. When she brought that single flower to the queen, its power surpassed even the legends. Lyra had learned that the most potent creation doesn't need a witness. It only needs a believer. On my own journey, I applied this lesson to overcome a deep-seated fear. Instead of declaring to the world, "I am going to change," an act that only creates pressure and unwanted attention, I decided to make a silent pact. I took small, secret actions every day. I read a page from a book about courage that no one knew about. I practiced a breathing exercise before a difficult situation without telling a soul. These secret actions focused my energy in an incredible way. They were powerful affirmations not to the world, but to myself and the universe. And the change came not like a thunderstorm, but like a sprout quietly emerging from the darkness. The universal law conserving creative energy, one of the most powerful laws of manifestation, is encapsulated in this truth. The greatest growth begins in darkness, nurtured by faith and protected by silence. When you have a desire, a dream, treat it as a sacred seed. Talking about it too early, especially to seek external validation, is like digging that seed up every day to see if it has sprouted. That act not only disrupts the growth process, it demonstrates a lack of faith. Your doubt is poison to your own seed. Your creative energy is finite. Every time you talk about your plans, you are releasing a portion of that energy into the world. Conserve it. Let it build within you, becoming a potent pressure, a focused resonance. Your role is that of a wise gardener. Prepare the soil. Your belief provide the water, your silent actions, and then step back, trusting the life that is unfolding beneath the surface. Practice the covenant action. To harness the power of sowing in silence, undertake this covenant-making exercise. Identify your seed. Choose a dream or a goal that is truly important and meaningful to you, something your soul yearns for. Take a vow of silence. Make a commitment to yourself that you will not speak about this specific goal to anyone for a set period, e.g., 30 days. This is not deception. This is the creation of a sacred, energetic womb to protect your dream. Perform a secret action. Within 24 hours of making your vow, take one small concrete action toward that goal. The key is this: no one else must know about this action. If you want to write a book, secretly write the title or the first page. If you want to improve your health, secretly go for a 15-minute walk. If you want to start a business, secretly sketch an idea on a piece of paper and put it away. Uphold your faith. This small secret act is your covenant. It is a declaration through action, not words, that you are all in. Now your task is to hold that faith. Each day, take a moment to silently send trusting energy to your seed, knowing that unseen forces are at work to bring it into reality in ways you could never anticipate. You are learning to be a discreet co-creator with the universe, and it is in that trust and secrecy that the greatest miracles take root. Chapter 8. The Sacred Art of Rest. I used to be a disciple of busyness. I believed my worth was measured by the hours I worked, that success was the direct result of relentless effort. I wore my exhaustion like a badge of honor. Weekends were filled with work, and any moment of rest was accompanied by a creeping sense of guilt. But the result of that constant striving wasn't excellence. It was a thick fog in my mind, a series of unwise decisions, and a soul depleted of energy. It wasn't until I was forced to stop on a vacation where I couldn't bring my work that I discovered a profound truth. After a few days of doing nothing, of just walking and breathing, my mind became crystal clear. Solutions to intractable problems suddenly appeared with ease, not from effort but from stillness. I learned that rest isn't the enemy of effectiveness. It is the very source of clarity. The story of Lord Ronan, the great strategist, is a lesson on the power found in the pause. The setup. The tireless strategist. Lord Ronan was the brain of the kingdom. His strategies had saved the realm from numerous wars and brought prosperity through shrewd treaties. His reputation was built upon a seemingly endless foundation, his intellectual energy. His study was lit from before dawn until late into the night, filled with maps, scrolls, and intelligence reports. Ronan believed that the moment he stopped thinking was the moment he failed. He equated his value with the ceaseless activity of his mind. The tension, the fog of exhaustion. The kingdom faced its most sophisticated threat yet. It wasn't an invading army, but a complex web of economic warfare and political discord sown by a clandestine rival coalition. It was like an invisible net. The more the kingdom struggled, the tighter it was pulled. Ronan threw himself at the problem the only way he knew how, by working more. He slept less, read more reports, and forced his mind to operate at maximum capacity. But his brain, once a sharp sword, was now dull and worn. His thoughts ran in hopeless circles. His judgment, once flawless, was now prone to small but damaging errors. His relentless effort didn't break the net. It created a thick fog in his own mind, preventing him from seeing the key threads. The shift. The king's strange command. The old king, a man whose wisdom came more from observing life than from reading books, saw the exhaustion in the eyes of his most brilliant strategist. He didn't ask for a new report. Instead, he gave a strange command. "Ronan," the king said gently, "for the next 2 days I forbid you to enter this room. Go to the royal gardens. Your task is not to think. Your only task is to watch the bees and listen to the running water. This is an order." Feeling deeply guilty and confused, but unable to disobey his king, Ronan reluctantly complied. The first day was torture. His mind screamed, trying to solve the problem while his eyes were looking at flowers. But on the second day, a shift occurred. He was too tired to resist the rest. He stopped trying. He just sat. He watched a bee fly from one flower to the next, a perfect rhythm of action and rest. He listened to the steady flow of water from the fountain, a sound that was both in constant motion and yet profoundly peaceful. He was practicing the art of doing nothing. And in that non-judgmental stillness, the fog in his mind began to lift. The resolution, the clarity of stillness. On the afternoon of the second day, as Ronan sat quietly by the fountain, thinking of nothing in particular, the answer arrived. It wasn't the result of a grueling analytical process, but a sudden revelation, complete and crystal clear. The enemy's entire complex network was propped up by a single secret financial source. If that funding was cut, the entire coalition would collapse like a house of cards. The answer wasn't found. It arrived in the stillness. Ronan returned not with a complicated plan, but with a single decisive action. The strategy worked perfectly. Lord Ronan had learned his most valuable lesson. His greatest asset wasn't his ability to think relentlessly, but the wisdom to embrace strategic silence. From then on, he became an even greater strategist, one who understood that the greatest breakthroughs are born not from an overworked brain, but from moments of conscious withdrawal. In my own healing journey, I learned this same lesson. When faced with an emotional wound, my instinct was to work on it, to analyze, to read, to try and process it. But true healing didn't happen in a state of striving. It happened in the moments I allowed myself to take a deep rest, when I stopped trying to fix myself and shifted into a state of reception. In that rest, my body and soul had the space to perform their own miraculous healing work. The universal law, the rhythm of action and reception. The universe operates on a sacred rhythm like the in-breath and the out-breath. Action is the out-breath you sow, you strive, you give. Rest is the in-breath you quiet down, you restore, you receive. To only exhale without inhaling leads to suffocation. Intentional rest is not laziness. It is a spiritual art. It is the act of shifting your energy from a state of striving to a state of reception. In a state of striving, you chase opportunities. In a state of reception, you become a magnet for opportunities, clarity and solutions to come to you. Stillness is not an absence of power. It is power in its most concentrated and purest form, waiting to be unleashed in your next action. Practice the ritual of honoring stillness. To learn to harness the power of rest, practice this ritual as a sacred commitment to yourself. Schedule your stillness. Just as you would schedule an important meeting, block out a non-negotiable period in your calendar just for doing nothing. Start with 20 minutes. Mark it down as a meeting with your soul. Declare your intention. As you begin this period, sit down and say quietly or aloud, "This is a sacred time of rest. I give myself permission to be completely still. I release all guilt about needing to be productive. My only task right now is to exist." Practice releasing guilt. During this time, your mind will likely present a long list of things you should be doing. Whenever such a thought arises, don't fight it. Simply acknowledge it, smile, and gently let it float by like a cloud. Return your awareness to the feeling of your breath or the sound of the silence. Embrace the receptive state. You can sit, lie down, or gaze out a window. The goal is to feel the subtle shift in your energy as you stop demanding that you perform. Feel the peace and spaciousness that opens up within you. By honoring rest, you are aligning yourself with the rhythm of the universe. You are creating the space for your greatest breakthroughs, and you are learning that sometimes the most powerful action is to do nothing at all. Chapter 9. The Invisible Hand of the Cosmic Conductor. I once lost a job that I believed was my everything. I had built my entire identity and my future plans around it. When it fell apart, I felt as if the universe had betrayed me. My first reaction was to panic and fight. I frantically sent out dozens of applications for similar positions, desperately trying to recreate the exact path I had mapped out. Every rejection was a knife twist, and every closed door reinforced the feeling that I was alone against the world. It wasn't until I was completely exhausted with no backup plans left that I truly surrendered. In the quiet humility of my failure, I said a simple prayer, "I don't know where to go anymore. Please lead the way." And that's when the magic began. An unexpected opportunity in a completely different field found me. It was a path I had never once considered, yet it fit my soul perfectly. Looking back, I realized that losing that job wasn't a punishment. It was a divine intervention, an invisible hand that gently pushed me off the narrow path I had drawn for myself to guide me toward a far more brilliant destiny. The story of Jorik the caravan leader is a vivid testament to how the universe's plan can be far greater than our own. The setup, the master of maps. Jorik was the most capable caravan leader in all the kingdoms. His reputation wasn't built on luck, but on absolute control. He was a master of maps. Before every journey, he charted every mile, calculated every ration, and knew the location of every well and every treacherous pass. Jorik believed his success was the result of his iron will and his ability to foresee every risk. He didn't believe in fate. He believed in his plan. The tension when the map betrays you. Jorik accepted a life-changing commission to transport a precious cargo of silks and spices to the capital for a royal wedding. He spent months drafting the perfect plan, the fastest, safest route. He had accounted for everything except for the intervention of a greater intelligence. From the very first day, his plan collapsed. An unexpected landslide blocked the main pass. He tried to take a detour, but a bridge had been washed away by a flood. He pushed his men and animals to their limits, trying to cling to his schedule, but they were met with one inexplicable obstacle after another. A sense of powerlessness enveloped Jorik. He felt as if an invisible force was deliberately mocking his efforts. His desperate struggle seemed only to invite more impediments. He was unintentionally blocking the very current of help that was trying to guide him down a different path. The shift, burning the map. Stranded in a remote village with his cargo at risk of spoiling and his companions losing faith. Jorik hit rock bottom. All his plans had failed. That night, sitting by the fire with a heavy heart, he did something he never would have imagined. He took out his detailed map, the symbol of his control and his pride, and slowly placed it in the flames. As the map burned to ashes, a strange peace washed over him. It was the peace of surrender. For the first time in his life, he admitted that he did not have the answer. He said to the universe, "I give up. I have no more plans. It is your turn now." It was his bravest act of trust, an invitation for help from the invisible hands. The resolution, the path, not on the map. The next morning, Jorik no longer gave orders. He simply told his party to watch for signs. A bird with unusually blue-tipped wings circled before them, and they decided to follow it. The bird led them into a lush, hidden valley, a place that didn't exist on any of Jorik's maps. In that valley, they met a tribe of weavers who lived in isolation from the world. When these people saw Jorik's silks, they brought out their own fabrics to show him a material woven from the fibers of a plant that only grew in their valley, shimmering like moonlight and lighter than spider's silk. A trade was made. Jorik exchanged part of his cargo for rolls of the magical mooncloth. When he arrived at the capital much later than planned, he did not bring what the royal family had expected. He brought something they had never dared to dream of. The mooncloth caused a sensation. It was more precious and coveted than any silk. Jorik not only made a fortune, he became a legend. He realized that the disasters that had ruined his plan were in fact divine arrangements. The invisible hands had blocked his old path not to punish him, but to guide him to a far more glorious one. In my relationships, I have also learned that the universe's plan is often better than mine. I used to try and direct difficult conversations with a script in my head of what I would say and what the other person should reply. But that control only created tension. True healing only came when I tore up my script and entered the conversation with an open heart, trusting that the wisdom of love would lead the way. The outcome was often not what I had planned, but it was always more authentic and profound. The universal law. Trusting the divine orchestration, a foundational truth of existence, is this. There is always a divine orchestration, a cosmic intelligence working for your highest good, even when you cannot see it. This intelligence is like an invisible conductor coordinating a complex symphony of events, people, and circumstances. Our struggle, worry, and attempts at control are like an amateur musician trying to play out of tune, creating dissonance and disrupting the overall harmony. Surrender is not weakness or failure. It is the act of putting down your instrument and trusting the conductor. It is the highest form of spiritual action because it requires the courage to trust in the unseen. When you stop trying to write the entire score yourself, you allow the conductor to perform a masterpiece through your life. The universe doesn't ask for your perfect plan, it only asks for your open heart. Practice handing over the map. This is a powerful ritual for practicing the art of surrender and inviting divine orchestration into your life. Identify your map. Recognize an area of your life that you feel you are tightly controlling. It could be a career plan, a desire for a relationship, or a specific financial goal. Picture it as an old, worn-out map you are clutching in your hands. Acknowledge the exhaustion. Allow yourself to feel the fatigue and stress that comes from trying to force everything to follow this map. Say aloud, I am tired of struggling. I have reached the limit of what I know. Make the act of surrender. Find a quiet place. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Imagine you are standing before a wise and loving presence. You can call it the universe God or the invisible conductor. Then say these words from your heart. I hand over this map. My plan is no longer working. I trust in your orchestration. I am ready to receive a new and better path, even if I cannot see it yet. Please lead the way. Watch for the signs. In the days that follow, your task is not to create a new plan, but to be observant. Pay attention to synchronicities, sudden ideas, unexpected encounters, or an inner urge to do something different. These are the first directions on your new path. By handing over the map, you aren't abandoning your destination. You are simply acknowledging that there is a better way to get there, a path drawn by the wisdom of the universe itself. Chapter 10. The great paradox: to hold on, you must let go. Have you ever tried to recall a name or a familiar melody? The harder you strain, the more you rummage through your mind, the further that thing seems to retreat into a fog. Your mind tenses and your very effort creates a wall. But the moment you surrender, the moment you say, "Oh, forget it," and turn your attention to something else, pop, the name suddenly appears in your head, clear and effortless. Life in its grandest affairs operates on this same subtle law. It is the greatest paradox of all: that which you desperately chase will flee from you. That which you release with trust will find its way back. The story of Reese and his search for the sun stallion is the final and most profound lesson in the art of letting go to truly receive. The setup. The haunted hunter Reese was the greatest hunter in the kingdom. He could track a wolf on stone and hear a deer's breath in the wind. But one legend haunted his entire life: the sun stallion, a mythical white horse with a mane of gold, said to appear only to those with a pure heart. Sighting it became his obsession, his sole purpose in life. He believed that in finding it he would find the peace and validation he had always craved. The tension, the endless chase. Reese spent decades tracking the stallion. He used all his skill, all his intellect. He saw signs of it everywhere: a single golden hair caught on a branch, a strange hoofprint by a stream, a fleeting white shadow on a distant hill. But that was all he ever got. The closer he came, the further it seemed to recede. His search slowly morphed into a desperate chase. His energy was no longer one of pure curiosity, but of needing to have. His heart was no longer pure, but heavy with a sense of lack. He had defined his entire self-worth by the stallion's absence. And the stallion, a creature of pure energy, sensed that frequency of clinging and desperation. It was pushed away by the very energy of the one seeking it. Reese's hunt was the greatest barrier between him and his heart's desire. The shift. The surrender in the white snow. One winter, old and exhausted Reese collapsed in a snow-covered clearing. The chase was over, not because he had found his prize, but because he no longer had the strength to search. He no longer cared about the stallion, about fame or legacy. He was just an old man sitting in the snow, watching his breath turn to mist. And in that moment of complete surrender, with no more wanting, no more clinging, a deep peace enveloped him. For the first time in years, he felt whole. He was whole without the stallion. He had returned to his natural state of sufficiency, a state that was not dependent on anything external. He had released his desire with total acceptance. The resolution when the seeker stops. The sought appears. As Reese sat there in stillness and contentment, he heard a soft sound. He looked up. From between the silent, snow-laden trees, the sun stallion emerged. It was not afraid. Its golden mane shone brilliantly in the pale winter light. It walked slowly toward Reese, the hunter who no longer hunted. It gently nuzzled its head against the old man's weathered hand. Reese didn't try to touch it, didn't try to hold it. He just sat, and he received. He understood. The stallion was not a trophy to be conquered. It was a reflection. It was the symbol of the peace and wholeness he first had to find within himself. By letting go of the search, Reese had become a safe space for it to approach him. By ceasing the chase, he had allowed it to find its way home. In my own life, I recognized this paradox in my desire to be loved. When I tried to please everyone, when I desperately sought validation from the outside, I felt my most lonely. My please like me energy inadvertently pushed others away. It was only when I stopped, when I learned to fully love and accept my authentic self, when I no longer needed external approval to feel whole, that sincere love began to flow into my life naturally. I stopped chasing butterflies and instead tended to my own garden, and then the butterflies came on their own. The universal law release is the final signal. This is the ultimate lesson, the capstone of all that we have contemplated together. The universe cannot fill a clenched fist. It can only place its most precious gifts into an open hand. Clinging desperation and the need to have all broadcast a frequency of lack. It is a declaration to the universe that says, I am not whole without this. And the universe, in its perfect consistency, responds by maintaining that state of lack for you. To let go of a desire is not to abandon it. It is the highest act of faith. It is the energetic shift from, I need it, to I know it is already mine and it will arrive in the most perfect time. When you can sincerely release something without bitterness, you are sending a powerful signal that you have returned to your own innate whole. Gigantalness. That act of release creates a sacred vacuum. It is the final invitation, clearing the path for what is truly yours to find its way home, unhindered by your fear and control. Practice the ritual of releasing with trust. This is the final and most powerful ritual. It is a physical act to practice the art of letting go. Write down the desire. Take a small piece of paper and write down clearly the desire you have been clinging to most tightly. Infuse it with gratitude. Hold the paper in your hands. Close your eyes. Instead of feeling lack, actively evoke a deep sense of gratitude that this desire has existed for the lessons it has taught you. Feel the joy as if it were already fulfilled. Declare the release. With all sincerity and trust, say these words aloud. This desire is beautiful and sacred. Thank you for coming to me and giving me direction. Now, with all my love and faith in the divine orchestration of the universe, I release you. I no longer cling to the timing or the method. I trust that what is meant for me will always find its way to me. I am whole right now. The physical act of release. Perform a symbolic act to release the paper. You could burn it and watch the smoke dissipate into the air. You could release it into a river and watch it float away. Or you could bury it at the base of a tree. This act is your signature on a contract with the universe. It is a declaration that you are no longer holding on. You have opened your hand, ready to receive. Your job now is not to wait. Your job is to live in the wholeness you have just reclaimed. and to trust that the invisible conductor is arranging a symphony even more magnificent than you ever dreamed. Chapter 11. Dancing with Reality. Stop resisting. Start living. I used to be a warrior against minor inconveniences. I waged war on the rain when I had plans to go out. I declared war on the traffic when I was in a hurry. I battled with a device that suddenly broke. Every event that didn't go my way was a personal enemy, and each time I charged into battle with fierce internal resistance. I believed my frustration was justified, that I had a right to demand the world operate according to my plan. But what was the result of those battles? The rain still fell, the traffic remained jammed, and the device stayed broken. The only thing harmed was my own inner peace. It wasn't until I learned to take a deep breath in the middle of a traffic jam and say, I am here, that I realized the truth. The chaos wasn't on the outside. The chaos was the very war I was creating inside myself against what is. The story of Master Elian, the royal scribe, is a lesson in transforming chaos into art through the power of acceptance, the setup, the seeker of perfection. Master Elian was a legend in the royal library. His calligraphy was a dance of perfection, and the books he created were treasures of order and beauty. Elian's life was a relentless pursuit of control. To work, he required absolute silence, unvarying light, and the perfect ink. Any deviation, a cough from an apprentice, a cloud obscuring the sun, was seen by him as a violation, an enemy of flawlessness, the tension, the war against imperfection. Elian was given the highest commission of his life to create an illuminated manuscript of the kingdom's history. Time was short, and the pressure was immense. He prepared his workshop like a sanctuary of perfection. But from the very first day, reality refused to follow his plan. A nearby construction project created incessant noise. The weather was erratic, causing the light in his room to constantly shift. A clumsy apprentice spilled a drop of water on a painstakingly prepared page of vellum. To Elian, this was a catastrophe. He sank into resistance. He cursed the builders. He snarled at the clouds. He berated the apprentice. But his anger and resistance only made things worse. His hand, once steady as a rock, now trembled with rage, making his script rigid and lifeless. The more he fought against imperfection, the more mistakes he created. His resistance was feeding the very chaos he despised. The shift. The lesson from the stonemason. One afternoon, after ruining another page out of sheer frustration, Elian threw down his quill and stormed out of his workshop. He wandered into the castle courtyard and came upon the masons hewing stone. He watched them work. They didn't use brute force to conquer the rock. They studied it, looking for the natural grain, the hidden fissures, and worked with it. An old stonemason, seeing the look on Elian's face, said, "Master scribe, we don't command the stone. We listen to it. The stone tells us how it wishes to be shaped." Those simple words were an awakening for Elian. He had been trying to command reality. He had been trying to fit the entire world into his tiny box of perfection. He realized he had been fighting a war he could never win, the resolution turning the stain into a cloud. Elian returned to his workshop, but with a completely different mindset. He was no longer at war. He began to dance. He listened to the distant hammering, and instead of resisting it, he heard it as the heartbeat of a growing kingdom and let his script flow with its rhythm. He no longer cursed the clouds, but learned to dance with the light. He used the moments of bright sun for gilding and the overcast moments for the black lettering. And then he picked up the page ruined by the drop of water. Instead of discarding it, he accepted it. He looked at the faint blotch, and instead of seeing a mistake, he saw an opportunity. With his masterful skill, he artfully transformed the stain into a soft, billowing cloud which became the backdrop for a miniature painting of the sky. That page, once a symbol of failure, was now the most vibrant and unique in the entire manuscript. By saying yes to reality, Elian didn't just survive the chaos. He transformed it into beauty. He discovered that when you stop resisting invisible pathways, appear pathways that resistance had previously obscured. I have seen this law operate in my own relationships. There was a time I would resist a habit or a personality trait in someone I loved. I tried to change them, to persuade them. My resistance only made that trait in them stronger, as if in self-defense. What you resist persists. It was only when I learned to accept them completely, including the parts I didn't like, that the magic happened. When my resistance vanished, their behavior often softened. My acceptance took the power out of the problem and opened a space for harmony. The universal law, the path of least resistance. The universe, like water, always flows along the path of least resistance. When you push against the current, you are not just fighting the circumstance. You are fighting the operational laws of the entire cosmos. Your exhaustion comes from that fight. Acceptance is not passivity or resignation. It is a supreme act of wisdom. It is recognizing that resisting reality is as futile as shouting at a hurricane. By saying yes to what is, you stop wasting energy on a meaningless battle. You take the power away from the problem and give it back to yourself. When you accept, the universe shifts from an adversary to an ally, and you begin to see the easier paths that you were previously blind to. Practice the 3-breath ritual of acceptance. This is a quick and powerful practice to use in the very moment you feel resistance rising. Identify the resistance. The instant you feel annoyance, frustration, or disappointment over an email, a comment, an unexpected event, pause. Name the feeling in your mind. This is resistance. First breath. Acknowledge reality. Take a deep breath in. As you exhale, say silently, the truth is, this is happening. For example, the truth is, the flight is delayed. Or the truth is, that person said that. This is about seeing reality squarely without adding story or judgment. Second breath. Release the fight. Take a second deep breath. As you exhale, say silently, I release the desire for this to be different. This is the moment you consciously lay down your weapons. You don't have to like it, you just have to stop fighting it. Third breath. Open to new possibility. Take a final deep breath. As you exhale, ask a gentle question. In this reality, where is the path of peace? Or in this situation, what can I learn? Don't try to answer. The act of asking the question shifts you from a victim of circumstance to a wise observer ready to see a new way forward. Practice this simple ritual, and you will discover that you have the power to turn the irritating pebbles on your path into stepping stones toward peace. Chapter 12. The Power of Sacred Containment. I used to have a habit whenever a creative idea flashed in my mind, a pure spark of excitement, I would immediately find a friend to share it with. I did it thinking that speaking it aloud would make it more real, but the result was often the opposite. When I presented my idea, it was instantly forced to confront the outside world. My friend would ask logical questions. How are you going to do it? Have you thought about this problem? And suddenly my idea, once a brilliant orb of energy, was being analyzed, dissected, and forced to defend itself before it could even take form. The initial creative energy was transformed into the energy of debate. The pure joy was replaced by the burden of proof. The idea exposed to the open air too soon often lost its soul. The story of Isadora, the master perfumer, and her apprentice is a profound lesson on why the greatest creations are often born in silence. The setup, the alchemist of scented souls. In all the kingdoms, no one could create perfumes that compared to Isadora's. Her creations weren't just scents. They were memories in a bottle, emotions distilled into liquid. She was famous for her quiet and mysterious nature. It was rumored that Isadora's magic lay not in her rare flowers, but in her silence, the tension. The vessel opened too soon. A young and talented apprentice named Kyle joined her workshop. Kyle came from the world of noise, a world where it was believed that collaboration and discussion were the keys to success. When tasked with creating his first signature scent, Kyle was incredibly excited. He talked about it with everyone. He discussed the ingredients with other apprentices. He asked the gardeners for their opinions. He tried to describe the soul of the scent he was aiming for to anyone who would listen. He believed that speaking it aloud would fortify his intention. But a strange thing happened. The more he talked, the more he felt his idea become diluted. The notes he combined didn't harmonize. They clashed and screamed. His creation was shallow and lacked depth. His entire creative energy seemed to have leaked out through his words, leaving him with a muddle of disconnected ideas instead of a unified masterpiece. The shift. The secret of distillation. Desperate from his failure, Kyle went to Isadora and begged her to reveal her secret. Isadora didn't teach him a new technique. Instead, she led him to a small, dark, and carefully sealed cellar. This was where she aged her most precious perfumes. She pointed to a simple but beautiful crystal flacon. "The most precious essences are also the most volatile," she said softly. "If you open the vessel to the air too soon, the soul of the scent escapes, leaving behind only an empty body. Your words are that open air, Kyle. You are letting the soul of your creation escape before it has had a chance to mature." Then Isadora gave Kale a new assignment, to create a perfume exclusively for the kingdom's quiet princess. But this time there was one rule: he was forbidden from speaking a single word about it to anyone until it was completely finished. He was to practice sacred containment. The resolution. A fragrance bloomed in silence. At first, staying silent was torture for Kyle. But gradually he noticed a powerful change. No longer distracted by the need to explain or seek consensus, his focus became absolute. The energy he once wasted in discussions was now compressed and poured directly into the creative process. He was no longer just mixing ingredients. He was infusing them with his stillness, his concentration, and his silent intention. He was forging a deep connection, a private secret between himself and his work. When Kale finally presented the finished perfume to the princess, it was a masterpiece. It was not a loud fragrance, but a subtle, profound, and emotional whisper. The princess, after taking one deep breath, had tears in her eyes and said, "This scent is like a memory of a home I have never been to." Kale had learned the ultimate secret. Creative power is not declared, it is contained. It is nurtured in the pressure cooker of silence until it becomes so potent that its expression into the world is inevitable. I have also applied this in my journey with my health goals, when I would loudly declare I'm starting a healthy lifestyle. The act itself created unnecessary pressure. Every meal I ate was noticed by others, every choice was judged. The real sustainable change only came when I decided to do it in silence. I told no one. I just quietly acted, turning it into a personal commitment. My energy wasn't scattered on explanations, but was focused entirely on execution. And when the results appeared on their own, they carried a power of truth, a certainty that no declaration could ever match. The universal law contained to amplify. The universe does not respond to the volume of your declarations. It responds to the intensity of your silent certainty. This is the law of sacred containment. Imagine your intention and desire as steam. If you let it continuously escape through the cracks of your words, it will dissipate into the air. But if you hold it within a sealed vessel, your silence, the pressure builds. The energy is accumulated, compressed until it reaches a point where it has enough power to move reality itself. Keeping a dream silent is not an act of weakness or fear. It is an act of power and wisdom. It is the recognition that your creative energy is a precious resource to be protected, not for discussion, but for creation. Let your deepest dreams be a sacred secret between you and the universe. Practice the energy containment exercise. This is a practice for you to directly experience the power of conserving your creative energy. Identify the idea seed. Choose an idea, a project or a new goal that is just beginning to sprout in your mind, something that gives you a spark of excitement and hope. Create the sacred vessel. Make a covenant with yourself. For the next 7 days, this idea will be an absolute secret. You will not talk about it, write about it publicly, or seek anyone's opinion on it. Imagine you are placing the idea in a beautiful crystal vessel and sealing the lid. Nourish from within. Instead of talking about it, use that energy to nurture the idea from the inside. Each day, spend 5 to 10 minutes in silence. Feel the excitement of the idea. Imagine it perfectly formed. Write your thoughts down in a private journal that no one else will read. Feel the accumulated power. At the end of the 7 days, sense your idea. Does it feel stronger, more real, more solid? You are learning to distinguish between the diluted energy of discussion and the condensed, potent energy of containment. You are learning to be an alchemist of energy. Let your certainty be your prayer, and let your silence be the incubator for your miracles. Chapter 13. The Language of the Heart. When emotion becomes creative power. I once tried to build my life based on a logical blueprint. I made pro and con lists for every decision. I chose a career path that offered financial security. I tried to build relationships based on what was sensible. My mind was in complete agreement with these choices. Everything looked right on paper, but there was a strange problem. My heart felt heavy. There was no joy, no energy. I felt like I was living someone else's life, a life that was perfectly assembled, but devoid of a soul. It wasn't until I dared to do something illogical, to abandon the safe path to follow a vague, passionate calling from my heart, that I truly began to live. Energy flowed, creativity exploded, and opportunities that no blueprint could have ever predicted appeared. I learned that the mind can help you avoid mistakes, but only the heart can lead you to miracles. The story of Master Theron, the royal cartographer, is a lesson on the limits of logic and the boundless power of the heart. The setup. The worshipper of precision. Master Theron was a man of numbers and straight lines. His maps were masterpieces of accuracy, capable of guiding ships through the most treacherous seas. He believed the world was a giant machine that could be decoded with logic. To him, emotions, intuition, and myths were just noisy data error margins that needed to be eliminated to arrive at the truth. He believed in what could be measured and scoffed at what could not. The tension, the showdown with the Isle of Mist. One day, the king gave Theron a task he considered an insult: to map the Whispering Isle, a mythical island said to be constantly moving within a fog, findable only by those whose heart leads the way. Theron approached the task with ironclad logic. He studied sea currents, analyzed wind patterns, and tried to find a pattern in the contradictory tales of sailors. He cast a complex grid of coordinates over the sea, trying to capture the island with statistical probability. But months passed, and all he found was an empty ocean and a thick fog that seemed to mock him. For the first time in his life, his genius brain was utterly powerless. The more he tried to calculate, the more lost he felt. His logic had collided with a reality that did not follow its rules. The shift. The heart's compass. One hopeless afternoon, as his ship drifted aimlessly, Theron threw down his measuring tools. He sat on the deck, allowing himself for the first time to truly feel his failure. In that moment of surrender, a shy young cabin boy approached him and said, "Master Theron, my grandmother says you don't find the isle with your eyes. You find it with your heart. The feeling, it's like the feeling of warm sunshine on a cold winter's day." Previously, Theron would have laughed at such a statement, but now, with his logic defeated, he had only silence left. He closed his eyes. He stopped trying to think about the island's location. Instead, he tried to follow that foolish advice. He focused on feeling the sensation of warm sunshine on his skin. He let that feeling spread through his chest. And then a gentle pull, an invisible heading, a heart's compass pointed in one direction. There was no reason, no data, just a quiet, certain feeling. With one last shred of doubt, he gave an order that went against all of his calculations. The resolution, when emotion drew the map. The ship changed course, sailing into a region unrecorded on any chart. A few hours later, the thick fog suddenly parted, and before them the Whispering Isle appeared shimmering in the sun, more beautiful than any story had described. Theron stepped onto the island, a different man. He realized the world wasn't just a problem to be solved, but a symphony to be felt. He had been trying to read the sheet music when he should have been listening to the melody. He returned with not just a map, but a new understanding. From that day on, his maps were not only accurate, they had a soul. It was said that when you looked at Theron's maps, you didn't just see the path, you could feel the land itself. He had learned that the mind is a wonderful tool, but the heart is the true guide. In my own life, I saw this truth when decorating a room. I could plan it logically. This color paint goes with that furniture, this size fits that space. The result could be a room that was theoretically harmonious, but it felt cold and impersonal. But when I stopped thinking and started feeling, choosing a painting simply because it made me happy, keeping an old chair just because it felt cozy, that room became a home. It became a reflection of my energy and emotion, a place that logic alone could never have created. The universal law feeling is the prayer. The language the universe understands best is not the language of logic or words. It is the language of energy and emotion. Your mind can analyze what already exists, but it is your heart that creates what is to come. Thought may be the architect who draws the blueprint, but emotion is the crew that builds the structure. To simply think about what you want with no accompanying emotion is like having a blueprint with no building materials. To manifest a new reality, you must be able to feel it first. When you can attune the frequency of your heart so that it vibrates with the feeling of joy, abundance, and gratitude, as if your desire were already a reality, your entire being becomes a living prayer. You become an energetic magnet broadcasting a clear and powerful signal that the universe cannot help but respond to. Trust your intuition, for it can see the paths that the eyes of logic can never perceive. Practice the reality feeling practice. This is an exercise to shift your focus from your mind to your heart, to speak the native language of the universe. Identify your desire. Choose something you truly wish to invite into your life. Pause the mind, consciously recognize that figuring out the how or the path is not your job in this moment. Gently ask your logical mind to step back and simply be an observer. Ask the heart. Close your eyes and place one or both hands on your heart. Take a deep breath. Then ask yourself a simple question: what would it feel like if this were already true right now? Immerse in the emotion. Don't try to visualize a detailed picture. Focus entirely on evoking and feeling the emotional state. What would the feeling of relief spreading through your body be like? The sensation of a natural smile appearing on your lips, the warmth of gratitude in your chest. Stay with that emotion for a few minutes. Let it fill you. Send gratitude. End by silently giving thanks for having had this emotional experience. Trust that by creating that emotional imprint, you have planted a powerful seed in the energetic field of the universe. You are no longer just thinking about it. For a moment, you became it. And that is all the universe needs to begin its work. Chapter 14. Seal. Your lips open the channel. Imagine you are blowing up a balloon. As you blow, you pour your energy, potential, and life force into it. The balloon swells vibrant and ready to soar, but instead of tying it off, you start telling everyone about your wonderful balloon. With every word, a little air hisses out. It's this beautiful shade of red, you say, and the balloon softens. I'm going to let it fly so high, you say, and it deflates a little more. By the end of your story, all that's left is a wrinkled, empty piece of rubber. Its potential has vanished into thin air through your words. This is precisely what happens to your desires every time you speak of them too soon. You are leaking the very energy needed to make them real. The story of Anya, the master glassblower, and the secret of the bellows is a lesson in why silence is the most powerful preparation of all. The setup. The Queen of Silence. The artisan Anya created works of glass so beautiful people believed they were made of moonlight and the breath of stars. Her workshop was a sanctuary of silence. When she worked, the only rule was that no one speak a single word. Her apprentices whispered among themselves that the magic was not in the sand or the fire, but in the stillness she commanded. The tension, the energy leak. A new apprentice named Liam joined the workshop. The young man was talented and passionate, but he brought with him the noise of the outside world. He believed that enthusiasm and encouraging words would fuel the work. The Duke commissioned Anya to create a legendary goblet of truth for his daughter's wedding. Liam was ecstatic. Despite Anya's rule, he couldn't keep quiet. "We are creating a treasure," he boasted to the others. He excitedly discussed the design, the colors he imagined. He believed he was contributing energy to the project. But every time Anya began the decisive stage of blowing the glass, something terrible happened. The glass cracked under the heat. An ugly air bubble appeared in a crucial spot. The shape of the goblet became inexplicably distorted. The intense, focused energy needed to shape the glass seemed to dissipate every time Liam spoke excitedly about it. Anya realized the problem wasn't in the furnace. There was an energy leak. The shift. The lesson of the bellows. After one particularly costly failure, Anya stopped all work. She did not scold Liam. She led him to the massive bellows of the furnace. She had Liam pump with all his might, filling it with a great volume of air. When the bellows was taut and full of potential, Anya opened one small valve. A weak hiss sounded, and all that powerful air escaped uselessly. "That is your speech, Liam," Anya said, her voice low and clear. "You gather a great breath enough to create a masterpiece, but you let it leak out through meaningless words." The channel was open, but the pressure was gone. She looked the young man squarely in the eye. "For the final attempt, your job is not to speak, but to guard the silence. Become the walls of the vessel. Protect this energy." The resolution, the sacred vessel. Liam finally understood. This time, as Anya prepared the workshop, was plunged into a near-total silence, broken only by the growl of the fire in the furnace. Liam stood there silent as a statue. He was not just silent with his mouth. He was silent with his entire being, becoming a loyal guardian of that sacred space. Now, working inside a perfectly sealed, energetic vessel, Anya moved like a dancer. Her breath, focused and powerful, blew into the molten glass. The goblet took shape perfectly without a single flaw. When Anya lifted it from the fire, it seemed to glow from within, as if it had absorbed and contained all the silence and focused energy in the room. Liam had learned the most important lesson. Creative power is not a dialogue. It is a contained force. By sealing his lips, he helped open the channel for a miracle to be born. In my own life, I've seen this law when embarking on a major change. When I announced I'm going to move to a new city, I turned that possibility into a story. That story then needed to be retold, defended from doubt, and embellished to impress. My energy was consumed by managing the story. But when I decided on another change in silence, when I quietly researched, planned, and acted, I felt a powerful inner momentum. Every silent action was a compression of energy. By the time I was ready, the change was no longer a story to tell. It was an irreversible reality. The universal law, seal to focus. This is a physical law of spiritual energy. Energy follows attention. Speech scatters attention. Silence focuses it. Every one of your intentions and desires carries an energetic charge. Each time you talk about it, you are creating a leak, dissipating that charge. The universe doesn't respond to loud declarations or good stories. It responds to the thrust created by focused energy. Stop turning your dream into a topic of discussion. Instead, treat it as a sacred secret between you and the universe. Consider your silence the sacred vessel where you incubate and nurture your desire. Inside that vessel, the energy will accumulate, the power will multiply until the pressure of manifestation becomes so great that it must burst forth into the material world. Practice the energy sealing practice. This is a conscious practice for you to become the master of your own manifestation energy. Identify the goal to seal. Choose one goal, project, or desire for which you currently feel a strong creative energy. Make a vow of silence. Commit to yourself that for the next 48 hours you will not speak a single word about this goal to anyone. You will seal the vessel. Observe the urge. Pay close attention to the urge to share. When does it arise? Who do you want to tell? Simply observe this urge as a sign of energy seeking to leak. Every time you recognize it and choose silence, you are actively sealing the crack and redirecting that energy back inside. Creative action in silence. Take the very energy you just conserved and channel it into a small, private creative act. Write a paragraph, sketch an idea, research a key piece of information. Feel the difference between acting with full compressed energy and acting after that energy has been diluted by speech. By sealing your lips, you are not becoming weak or negatively secretive. You are becoming dangerously powerful. You are opening the channel for the universe to do its work through you. Chapter 15. The Great Mirror. The outer world is a reflection of your soul. I once went through a phase where my life seemed to be sinking into chaos. My relationships grew tense, my work was rife with unwanted problems, and I constantly felt like I was struggling. One day, exhausted, I looked around my apartment and suddenly realized it too was a mess. Clothes were strewn about, books were piled up, and a sense of stagnation permeated the space. My outer world was a perfect reflection of my inner turmoil. Feeling powerless to solve the great problems of my life, I decided to start with the one thing I could control: my room. I didn't do it as a chore, I did it as a ritual. I slowly cleaned, organized, and tidied every corner. As I created order on the outside, something magical happened. A corresponding order began to form within my mind. As the room became clear and peaceful, my mind also became clear and still. And from that stillness, solutions to the bigger problems began to emerge naturally. The story of the old king and his garden is the ultimate lesson in this law of reflection. The setup. The kingdom of peace. King Theron had ruled his kingdom for decades, in peace and prosperity. He was not a king of battles or iron commands. He was a king of stillness. He understood that a harmonious kingdom was a reflection of a harmonious soul. He spent as much time in his garden as he did in his throne room, and his peace radiated throughout the land. The tension, the reflection of unrest. But then a strange illness began to spread throughout the kingdom. It wasn't a plague carried on the wind, but a plague of anxiety. Minor disputes between lords suddenly became bitter. The harvests were still sufficient, yet the farmers began to worry about scarcity. An invisible tension crept into every street and every home. Swept up in the chaos, King Theron, in a moment of forgetting his own wisdom, tried to fix the outer world. He threw himself into meetings, tried to resolve every dispute, and issued new decrees. But the more he tried to extinguish the small fires, the more they seemed to flare up elsewhere. The kingdom, once a mirror of his peace, was now reflecting the growing anxiety and exhaustion within him. He was trying to wipe the reflection instead of cleaning the mirror itself. The shift. The lesson of the rose. One evening, after a long day of fruitless efforts, the king sat alone in his chambers. He felt the weight of the entire kingdom on his shoulders. His gaze fell upon a single rose in a vase on his table. Amidst the chaos overwhelming his mind, the rose was simply there, perfect, still, and peaceful. It wasn't trying to solve disputes. It wasn't worried about the harvest. It simply existed in its own wholeness, and the rose became his teacher. The king realized his mistake. He had allowed the outer chaos to invade and cloud his inner peace. The next morning, he did not summon his council. He simply went out to his garden. He didn't go to find a solution. He went to find himself. He sat beneath an ancient tree, and his only goal was to return to that state of deep stillness, the peaceful state that was his true nature. The resolution. When the king is at peace, the kingdom is in harmony. As the king sank deep into his stillness, as he released all need to fix or control, a subtle change began to take place. His peace was no longer just his own. It radiated an energy, a vibration that spread throughout the kingdom, and the mirror began to reflect the new image. A messenger arrived not with a new problem, but to announce that two feuding lords had unexpectedly met and reconciled on their own. Another report told of a gentle, timely rain that had fallen upon the driest lands. The anxiety among the people seemed to dissolve like mist in the morning sun. The king hadn't solved a single specific problem. He had solved the root of all problems, the chaos in his own soul. By becoming the embodiment of peace, he became a creative force, a still point around which the entire kingdom could reorganize itself. He had remembered the ultimate law of rulership. To bring peace to the world, one must first find peace within oneself. In our own bodies, this law holds true as well. When our minds are filled with worry and stress, our body, our closest mirror, reflects it back through headaches, digestive issues, and chronic fatigue. We can try to fix the symptoms with medicine, but true and lasting healing only comes when we heal our inner state. When we cultivate peace within the body, automatically responds with relaxation and health. The universal law, the mirror of reflection. This is the central law, the key to understanding all the others. The universe is a great mirror. It does not give you what you want. It reflects back to you who you are. The chaos, lack, or conflict you see in the outer world are not independent problems to be solved. They are symptoms, reflections of a corresponding inner state. Trying to change the outer world without changing the inner world is like trying to change your reflection by touching the surface of the mirror. The path to a harmonious and abundant life does not begin with external action, but with the cultivation of inner peace. Acceptance is the doorway, stillness is the path, and peace is the destination, a destination that is also the starting point. When you reach that state of peace, you are no longer an individual trying to act upon the universe. You merge with the creative force of the universe, allowing it to work through you, unimpeded. Practice the mirror practice. This is a practice for you to begin working with this ultimate law consciously. Identify the reflection. Choose an external circumstance in your life that is causing you stress. A relationship, work, finances. Look at it without judgment. Ask the mirror question. Instead of asking, "How do I fix this?" sit quietly and ask yourself a deeper question. What inner state within me is this situation reflecting perfectly? Is it a feeling of powerlessness, fear, a loss of control, a lack of trust? Identify the opposite state. Now identify the inner state you wish to cultivate, the state that will create a new reflection. If the outside is chaotic, choose peace. If the outside is lack, choose abundance. If the outside is conflict, choose harmony. Cultivate the inner garden. Set aside 5 minutes each day. Close your eyes. Do not think about the external problem. Instead, use your full concentration to feel the inner state you have chosen. Feel peace spreading through your body. Feel abundance filling your chest. Become the living embodiment of that state. Trust the law of reflection. After cultivating your inner garden, let go and trust. Your job is not to monitor whether the reflection has changed yet. Your job is to continue maintaining your inner peace. Trust that as you change, the reflection has no choice but to change with you. You are the artist, and your life is the canvas. Instead of trying to fix the strokes in the distance, learn to keep your own hand steady and your own heart at peace. The entire world will be repainted from that stillness. Chapter 16. Let it be, and it will become. I remember once trying to bake a loaf of bread from a complicated recipe. I followed every instruction perfectly, but while the bread was in the oven, I couldn't be patient. Every few minutes I would open the oven door to check on it to see if it had risen, if it had browned. My anxiety, my constant interference destabilized the oven's temperature. The result was a dense, tough, and unrisen loaf. The next time I did things differently. After placing the bread in the oven, I trusted. I trusted the recipe, trusted the yeast, trusted the heat of the oven. I let it be. And when I opened the door at the proper time, a golden brown, perfectly risen, fragrant loaf of bread greeted me. I learned that sometimes the most powerful action is non-action. My intervention, however well-intentioned, was the very thing preventing the best version of the bread from emerging. This final story is about Ilara, the weaver of the kingdom's tapestries, and the lesson of the final thread. The setup, the final masterpiece. After a long reign of peace and wisdom, King Theron gave Ilara, the kingdom's master weaver, one final task before her retirement, to weave a great tapestry that recorded not only the past, but also the future of the kingdom. It was to be the culmination of her life's devotion. Ilara wove the past with all her skill. She wove the battles, the bountiful harvests, the festivals, and the sorrows. But when she reached the final section, the part depicting the future, her hands began to hesitate. The tension, the burden of a perfect future. She had a clear vision of a perfect future for the kingdom, golden fields, prosperous cities, children always smiling. She tried to weave that vision, but the threads seemed to resist her. The golden thread turned dull, the blue thread constantly tangled. The picture she was trying to create looked stiff, lifeless, and forced. The more she tried to control it, the uglier the tapestry became. She felt the weight of an entire future pressing down on her old shoulders. Her struggle, her obsession with a perfect outcome, was ruining her own life's masterpiece. The shift. Entrusting to the river, during one sleepless night, Ilara looked at the tangled mess of thread on her loom and began to cry. And then she remembered a lesson she had learned long ago, a wisdom that went beyond her skill as a weaver. It was the wisdom of letting go. She carefully removed the tangled threads, the threads that carried the energy of her frustration and control. She placed them in a small wooden box. Under the moonlight, she carried the box to the riverbank. She didn't pray for a better outcome. She simply performed an act of entrustment. "The burden of a perfect future is no longer mine," she whispered to the river. "I release it to the flow of time and the invisible hands. Let it be." She gently placed the box in the water and watched it float away until it disappeared into the darkness. As the box vanished, the weight in her heart lifted. She returned with a profound sense of peace. The resolution when the hands are guided. The next morning, Ilara sat before the empty section of her loom. She had no plan, no vision. She simply closed her eyes and let her heart choose the threads. Her hands began to move not with the skill of her mind, but with the wisdom of her trust. They danced across the loom, guided by a force she could not see. The picture that emerged was not what she had planned. It didn't just have golden fields. It also had storm clouds in the distance, but beneath them were people sheltering one another. It didn't just have prosperous cities, but also quiet gardens where people sat in stillness. It wasn't just a future of perfection, but a future of resilience, of love, and of wholeness. It was more beautiful, more real, and more powerful than any vision her limited mind could have imagined. By letting go, Ilara had not given up. She had allowed a greater wisdom to weave the future through her hands. That tapestry became her greatest masterpiece, not because she had controlled it, but because she had allowed it to become itself. In life, we often worry for those we love. We try to map out a perfect path for our children, for our friends. We try to shield them from all pain, all mistakes. But that control, though born from love, is sometimes the very thing that prevents them from becoming the strongest versions of themselves. The ultimate act of love is sometimes to take a step back, trust in their journey, and whisper to the universe, "I entrust them to your care. Let them be, and they will become." The universal law release is the ultimate creative act. And so we come to the end of our journey to understand the simplest yet most profound law of all. The ultimate creative act is conscious release. Letting go of a struggle is not a sign of failure, but a sign of the highest level of spiritual maturity. It is the moment you recognize that your finite power is no match for the infinite wisdom of the universe. Your release creates the space for the invisible hands to rearrange the pieces, to weave solutions you could never have foreseen. Often the very things you release in trust return to you, but in a more perfect, more beautiful form, because then they are no longer limited by the interference of your fear and your ego. When you stop trying to control everything, you realize that everything has always been perfectly cared for. Practice the ritual of releasing the burden. This is the final ritual, an act you can carry with you and practice for the rest of your life. Write down the burden. Take a piece of paper, write down as specifically as possible a struggle, a worry, or a problem that you have been trying to control without success. Pour your heart out onto the page. Bundle the energy, fold the piece of paper. As you fold it, visualize that you are bundling all the energy of your anxiety, exhaustion, and fear into it. The words of release. Hold the paper in your hands. Find a place where you feel at peace. Say aloud or silently with all your sincerity to the infinite wisdom of the universe, "I have carried this burden for too long. I have tried with all my finite strength. Now, with trust and humility, I release this burden to you. I trust in the divine orchestration. I will rest in peace knowing that all is being taken care of." Release the burden. Now physically release the paper. You can burn it and let the ashes fly on the wind. You can release it into a body of water, or you can bury it in the earth. As you do so, truly feel that weight being lifted from your shoulders. Your work is now done. Your task is not to wait for the outcome, but to live in the peace you have just created for yourself. Trust. Let it be, and it will become. Chapter 17. The value of being. When doing nothing is the most powerful action, I used to live with a to-do list that never ended. I believed that a productive day was a day where I crossed off the most items. I rushed from one task to the next, driven by an unconscious belief that if I stopped, I would become worthless. My weekends were as busy as my weekdays, but at the end of each day, after having accomplished everything, I didn't feel fulfilled. I just felt empty and exhausted. I wore busyness like a badge of honor without realizing it was eroding my soul. It wasn't until I began a new practice, setting aside a period each day to purposefully do nothing. No reading, no music, no planning, just sitting and existing. At first, the guilt was overwhelming, but gradually I discovered a truth. It was in those very moments of stillness that I felt most profoundly recharged. My creativity and peace came not from my actions, but from the pauses between them. The story of Finian the royal steward is a lesson in how the greatest power of service can sometimes lie in silent presence. The setup, the steward of action. Finian was the most dedicated steward the royal castle had ever known. His life was a symphony of constant motion. He supervised the kitchens, coordinated the staff, arranged the banquets, and anticipated the queen's every need before she even realized it herself. He believed his value was measured by his usefulness, by the number of tasks he completed. To him, rest was synonymous with failure. The tension, the chaos of devotion, the young queen. A woman whose wisdom came from stillness was facing her first great challenge. a tense diplomatic negotiation. Seeing the Queen's anxiety, Finian, with all his loyalty, amplified his efforts. He worked himself to exhaustion to create a perfect environment. He rearranged the meeting room a dozen times. He inspected every minute detail of the meals. He constantly directed the staff, but his actions were born from fear and pressure, and his anxious, busy energy spread throughout the castle. The staff became agitated and prone to mistakes. The atmosphere, instead of being stately and peaceful, became thick with tension. Finian's efforts not only failed to help the Queen, they were contributing to a chaotic environment, mirroring the very anxiety inside him. The shift. The command of stillness. The day before the negotiation, the Queen summoned Finian. He arrived holding a scroll with a list of items to report. But the Queen didn't look at the scroll. She led him to a small, sun-drenched conservatory where she often went for quiet contemplation. She pointed to a chair beside her own. "Finian," she said gently, "for the next hour, your only task is to sit here with me. No talking, no planning, no worrying, simply be present." For Finian, this was the most difficult command he had ever received. Doing nothing was alien to his nature. He sat down rigidly, his mind still racing with his to-do list. But the peace that radiated from the Queen was contagious. Gradually, his heart rate slowed. For the first time in weeks, he heard the birds singing outside. He felt the warmth of the sun on his skin. He stopped doing and started being. The resolution, the power of presence. After an hour of silence, Finian rose as a different man. A deep peace had replaced his chronic restlessness. He realized that his own busyness had been contributing to the stress. He spent the rest of the day moving through the castle with a newfound stillness, and that energy calmed everyone he encountered. The next day, the negotiation took place. At an extremely tense moment when words became sharp, Finian, as was custom, entered the room silently to pour more water. But this time he didn't just bring the water pitcher, he brought the peace he had rediscovered. His completely still, non-judgmental, unworried presence created a subtle shift in the room. The argument paused. The visiting envoy took a deep breath, and the dialogue resumed, but in a more open tone. Finian had learned the greatest lesson of his life. His greatest service lay not in the countless tasks he completed, but in the quality of the presence he could offer. His value came not from what he did, but from who he was in his stillness. In the relationship with ourselves, we often fall into the same trap of doing. We are always trying to improve ourselves, read more books, learn more skills, trying to fix our flaws. But true growth often comes not from that relentless effort. It comes from the moments we stop trying and simply accept ourselves as we are. In that space of acceptance, our intrinsic worth has a chance to shine. The universal law of presence is magnetic. The modern world has taught us a profound misunderstanding that your value comes from your busyness and your productivity. The truth is the opposite. Your value is a truth of your existence, not an achievement of your actions. You are already whole and worthy right in this moment. The constant doing is often a way of running away from that truth. The universe doesn't need your busyness, it needs your presence. Peace is not an empty state, it is a magnetic force. When you can be still in that peace, you become a center of gravity, and the world will naturally reorganize itself harmoniously around you. It is in the pauses between your actions that the magic of divine orchestration has room to work. Practice the 5-minute practice of being. This is a practice to reconnect with your intrinsic worth and the power of your presence. Choose a safe space. Find a place where you can sit quietly for 5 minutes without being disturbed. Set a purpose-free intention. Say silently to yourself, "For the next 5 minutes, my only task is to exist. I do not need to become better, smarter, or more efficient. I am simply going to be present." Feel into life. Close your eyes. Bring your attention to the physical sensations of being alive. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel the air entering and leaving your chest. Feel the life that is quietly circulating through your body. You don't need to create these sensations. They are already there. You only need to notice them. Welcome the stillness. Your mind will likely offer urges to do something. Each time that happens, smile and return to the sensation of being. See this stillness not as laziness, but as a powerful act of recharging and connecting with the creative power of the universe. By practicing this sacred stillness daily, you are sending a powerful message to the universe and to yourself. My value lies not in what I do, but in the very fact that I am. And from that space of acceptance, your actions will become more powerful and effective than ever before. Chapter 18. The Hidden Muscle of Patience. I remember the helplessness of waiting for an important file to download over a slow internet connection. My gut reaction was impatience. I'd hit the refresh button, restart the program, and tap on the computer as if that could somehow urge it to go faster. But all those actions only made things worse. The program would freeze, the file would corrupt, and the whole process had to start over. My hurry, born from my resistance to the reality of having to wait, was ironically the very thing causing the greatest delay. It was only when I learned to lean back in my chair, take a deep breath, and trust that the process was unfolding at its own pace that things would complete smoothly. I learned that patience wasn't passive waiting. It was a conscious act of removing friction, allowing the natural flow to occur. The story of Master Kalen the Potter and the lesson of the kiln is a testament to how timing is an essential ingredient in every masterpiece. Introduction: the one who spoke to clay. Master Kalen created pottery that people said held a soul within them. His secret lay not only in his gifted hands, but in his profound understanding of time. He never rushed. He listened to the clay, sensing when it was ready to be shaped. He let his creations air dry naturally, and he had an almost mystical connection with his kiln, always knowing the precise moment to pull them out. The tension, a battle against time. The kingdom was preparing for the Centennial Festival, an event that occurred only once in a century. The king commissioned Kalen to create a set of ceremonial vases, a great honor, but one that came with a strict deadline. The pressure of time and adversary Kalen had never faced began to weigh on him. For the first time in his life, he tried to rush the process. He shaped the clay when it was still a bit too moist and unsettled. He placed the young vases in the harsh sun to dry them faster, an act that created tiny, invisible hairline cracks. The greatest disaster struck when he tried to shorten the firing time. Impatient, he opened the kiln too soon. The most beautiful vase, on contact with the sudden rush of cooler air, shattered into 100 pieces before his eyes. Kalen's haste, born from the fear of not finishing on time, had created resistance, and that resistance had caused the very delay he dreaded. He was trying to force a sacred process, and the universe had gently shown him the futility of his actions. The turning point, the lesson from the blacksmith. Sitting amidst the shards of his failed masterpiece, Kalen felt as if his gift had vanished. In despair, he sought out the forge of his old friend, Master Elias. He sat in silence, watching Elias work. He saw Elias heat a bar of metal in the fire until it glowed like the sun. Elias was not in a hurry. He watched the color, sensed the heat. He waited with an active patience. Only when the metal reached its perfect state of malleability did he begin to strike with his hammer. "My friend," Elias said, sweat glistening on his brow, "you cannot argue with the heat. The metal tells you when it is ready. To strike it when it is cold is not an act of strength, but of foolishness." Those words struck Kalen like a thunderbolt. He had been trying to shape cold clay. He hadn't been listening. He hadn't been trusting. He realized the delays were not rejections from the universe. They were necessary preparations. It was the universe firing the elements to perfection, and his patience was the act of waiting for that moment. The resolution, the perfection of timing. Kalen returned to his studio with a new spirit. He threw away the timeline in his head. He started again, but this time he was a partner to time, not its enemy. He worked slowly, mindfully. He let the vases dry at their own rhythm, even if it meant working through the night in the final days. When it was time to fire them, he sat before the kiln, not in anxiety, but in active trust. He trusted the fire, trusted the clay, trusted the process. And he waited until his intuition, his inner compass, told him the moment had arrived. The vases he pulled from the kiln this time were not just beautiful. They possessed a resilience, a deep integrity that the previous ones lacked. They were the embodiment of patience. He finished them just in time for the festival, and they were hailed as the greatest works of his lifetime. Kalen had learned that patience is not doing nothing. It is an active strength, the hidden muscle that allows magic the time it needs to form. In the journey of learning a new skill like playing an instrument, we often face this same lesson. We want mastery instantly. Impatience makes us feel discouraged and want to quit. We are like someone constantly digging up a seed to see if it has sprouted. True growth doesn't happen that way. It happens in quiet persistence, in the faith that every day of practice is another watering of the seed, even when we can't see the sprout. The delay in mastery is not a failure. It is the necessary time for our brain and body to form new connections, the universal law trust in divine timing. The universe operates on a perfect schedule, a divine timing that our limited minds cannot always comprehend. Everything has an unseen gestation period, a necessary preparation phase. Your hurry doesn't make the process faster, it only creates friction and resistance, like swimming against the current. Patience is not passivity. It is a state of active faith. It is you saying to the universe, I trust your process. I know that things are being perfectly arranged in the unseen, and I will not interfere with that work with my impatience. And that trust is the very force that allows the universe to work its magic most smoothly. Don't dig up your seeds. Trust that they are sprouting. Practice the seed in the soil exercise. This is an exercise to train the muscle of your patience and trust. Identify your seed. Choose a goal, a desire, or a project about which you feel the most impatient. Consciously plant the seed. Close your eyes. Visualize yourself lovingly placing this seed of desire into the rich soil of the universe. Water it with the energy of certainty that it will grow. Make a no-digging pact. Commit to yourself that for the next 7 days, every time you feel the urge to check on the progress, worrying, looking for signs, feeling impatient, you will not act on that urge. Take the action of trust. Instead, whenever impatience arises, place a hand on your heart and say silently to yourself, I trust the growth that is happening in the unseen. Everything is being perfectly arranged in divine timing. Feel the peace and power that comes from this affirmation. By doing this, you are retraining your nervous system out of the habit of anxiety and into a state of active trust. You are letting your seed rest so it can emerge in its full power when the perfect time arrives. Chapter 19. The Echo of Surrender. Reading the Language of the Universe. I remember a time when I was tormented by a major decision. I begged the universe for a sign. And so the hunt began. I analyzed the meaning of repeating numbers on the clock. I tried to decode the lyrics of a random song on the radio. I saw a feather on the sidewalk as a divine message. But the more I searched, the more confused I became. One sign seemed to contradict another, and my mind became a chaotic mess of superstition and anxiety. My desperate search was creating so much static that I couldn't hear a thing. It was only when exhausted and weary I truly gave up. I told the universe, all right, I don't need a sign anymore. I trust you. And in the silence that followed that surrender, when I was no longer looking, the guidance came through with absolute clarity. I overheard a conversation between two strangers in a coffee shop, and their words were the precise, profound answer to my problem. The sign didn't arrive when I hunted for it. It came as an echo of my surrender. The story of Lena and the Path of Pebbles is a lesson in how to hear the universe's whisper. Introduction: The Desperate Search. Lena's family had lost everything. Her only hope clung to an old family legend that their true inheritance was hidden where three ancient oaks join as one. With nothing left to lose, Lena began a journey to find that place, her heart heavy and her mind desperate. The tension, the static of signs. Lena believed the universe was obligated to show her the way, and so she began seeing signs everywhere. A bird flying west. She went west. A cloud shaped like a mountain. She headed for the mountains. A leaf falling in front of her. Surely it was a warning she was on the wrong path. Her mind became a storm of interpretation. She tried to force the universe to speak to her in a loud, obvious language, but her frantic search only created static. The signs contradicted each other, and she found herself walking in circles through the woods, growing hungrier and more tired each day. Her hunt for signs was drowning out the very subtle guidance the universe might have been trying to send. She was screaming too loudly to hear a whisper. The turning point. The calm after the storm. After weeks of fruitless wandering, Lena collapsed under a tree by a stream. She had no energy left, no hope. She had surrendered. I can't find it, she whispered to the sky. I release this search. I accept. She no longer begged for a sign, no longer demanded an answer. She simply allowed herself to rest. In that complete surrender, she fell into a deep sleep. Her desperate searching antenna was finally lowered. The resolution, the language of synchronicity. When Lena awoke for the first time in weeks, her mind was perfectly clear. The compulsion to search was gone. She went to the stream to drink with no other agenda. And that's when she noticed an unusually smooth gray pebble. She picked it up not because she thought it was a sign, but simply because it was beautiful. A little further on, she saw another one identical to the first. A gentle curiosity, not a frantic analysis, urged her on. She began to follow the path of pebbles. The path led her up a small hill, and there she saw it. Not three separate oaks. It was one enormous ancient oak whose trunk split near the base into three massive branches reaching for the sky, as if three trees had merged into one. At the base of the tree was a small hollow. Inside, protected from the elements, was an old chest. It wasn't the old land deeds for her family's former property. It was something far better, a royal charter granting her family stewardship over the entire hidden valley behind the hill, a land far more fertile and rich than anything they had lost. Lena understood. The pebbles were not signs to be hunted. They were a prearranged path, one that only became visible when she stopped searching and started walking in trust. What she had previously seen as random coincidence now revealed itself as divine arrangement. In my own creative process, I have learned this lesson well. When blocked, I used to hunt for inspiration. I'd read dozens of books, scroll through hundreds of images, trying to force an idea to come. But the search only brought fatigue. True inspiration only comes when I let go. When I take a walk, when I wash the dishes, when I'm no longer trying. And then a magical synchronicity will occur. A sentence I overhear, an image. I glimpse a melody I hear suddenly connects perfectly to my problem, opening a new path. The universal law, tune. Your antenna. The true language of the universe is not made of loud, obvious road signs. Its language is one of whispers of synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences, timely encounters, and subtly repeating messages. The universe whispers, it doesn't shout. Your desperate search creates too much noise to hear that whisper. You are like someone trying to tune into a subtle radio station, while the receiver is full of static. Your surrender and state of trust are the very acts that clear that static. It's like tuning your spiritual antenna to the exact frequency the universe is broadcasting on. When you stop demanding and shift into a state of pure receptivity, the messages become clear on their own. You will begin to realize that nothing is random. Practice the channel clearing exercise. This is a practice to shift you from a state of hunting to a state of receiving. Identify the hunt. The moment you notice yourself in a state of anxiety, analyzing everything for an answer or a sign, pause. Name the state, I am hunting. Declare your surrender. Say silently to yourself, I release the need to know the answer right now. I am ending the hunt for signs. I trust that guidance will come to me clearly and at the right time. My job now is to clear the channel. Ground yourself in the present. Actively shift your attention away from the problem and into one of your 5 senses for 1 full minute. For example, sight. Truly observe the veins on a single leaf. Sound, close your eyes and try to hear the most distant sound you can detect. Touch. Fully feel the warmth of a cup of tea in your hands. Maintain an open state. After clearing the channel, continue with your day with an attitude that is open but not searching. You have done your part. Now trust that if there is a whisper for you, you will hear it. You don't have to find guidance. You only have to become quiet enough to notice it has been there all along. Chapter 20. The Dance of Observation, Witnessing the Magic Unfold. Imagine you are a gardener. You have done all the necessary work. You have tilled the soil, making it soft and receptive, that is inner healing. You have planted the finest seeds, that is setting intentions. You have watered them with trust and sheltered them in silence, that is patience and sacred holding. Now what is your final job? Is it to run around the garden screaming at the seeds, demanding that they grow faster? No. The final stage, the most beautiful stage, is observation. You sit back perhaps with a cup of tea in hand and you witness. You witness the green shoots emerge from the earth on their own. You witness the leaves unfold to greet the sun on their own. You witness the flowers bloom in their own perfect time. You do not create the magic. You simply create the conditions and then become the astonished witness to the miracle of life as it unfolds on its own. This final story is about King Theron in his wisest years and the lesson of how to become an audience for the cosmic dance. Introduction: The Kingdom of Harmony. Many years had passed since King Theron learned the lesson of the Great Mirror. His kingdom was now a testament to his own inner peace. Harmony was not a goal to strive for. It had become the very air his people breathed. The king no longer ruled by decree, but by his very stillness. The tension, the final test of stillness. One day, a delegation arrived from a powerful distant empire. They were people of ironclad logic, of calculation and ambition. They brought with them a complex trade treaty with clauses cleverly designed to give them the upper hand. The king's council fell into a panic. They met day and night, analyzing every word, urging the king to devise a counter-strategy. The pressure to do something, to fight, to calculate, rose again. This was the final test of the king's wisdom. Would he be pulled back into the world of struggle, or would he hold fast to his peace? The turning point. The answer in the garden. Instead of locking himself in the council room, King Theron spent most of his time in the royal garden. He did not think about the treaty. He simply observed. He observed a spider patiently weaving its web. He observed the clouds drifting lazily by. He observed how the sunflowers turned toward the sun without any effort at all. He was not being passive. He was in a state of active observation. He trusted that the harmony he had cultivated would know how to protect itself. He knew that what was best for his kingdom was also seeking him, and it could not find him in the noise of an anxious council room. His job was not to create a solution. His job was to hold the peaceful space in which a solution could emerge on its own. The resolution, when observation becomes action. During the formal negotiation, the king simply sat utterly still and present. He listened more than he spoke. Because his mind was not clouded by fear or strategy, he saw things his advisors had missed. He saw the subtle rivalry between the two lead ambassadors, He saw the flicker of homesickness in the head delegate's eyes. At the most tense moment when the debate over a trade clause reached a stalemate, the king did not offer a counter-argument. Instead, he turned to the head delegate and asked with genuine sincerity about a famous poet from the man's homeland. That question, an act born of subtle observation and compassion, completely shifted the energy in the room. The head delegate's wall of defense crumbled. He began to speak of his home with a sudden passion. The negotiation of interests transformed into a conversation between human beings. The treaty that was finally signed was not a document of dominance, but one of mutual respect and friendship. The advisors were astonished. The king had not won the negotiation. He had allowed harmony itself to win. He had witnessed the masterful dance of the universe, and by holding his own peace, he had become the most perfect dance partner. In our daily lives, this dance is always happening. There are days when nothing seems to go wrong. You find a parking spot right out front. Your favorite song comes on just when you need to hear it. An old friend calls out of the blue. On other days, everything seems to be working against you. The difference is often not in the external world. It is in our inner state. On those good days, we are often in a state of allowing and peace. We are not creating the flow. We are simply in tune with it, and therefore we can see it. The universal law, discovering harmony, and this is the final truth. A truth you can rest in harmony is not something you must strive to create. It is an ever-present reality that you can only discover when your mind is still enough. What you seek, peace, love, abundance, is also always seeking you. But its gentle knock cannot be heard over the noise of striving and anxiety. Once you have learned to let go, to trust, and to accept, the final stage is not a new action. The final stage is enjoyment. Your job is not to be the conductor. Your job is to find a good seat in the theater of life, to listen and to enjoy the symphony that is already being written for you. Practice the Harmony Journal. This is not an exercise to make something happen. This is a practice to train your awareness so that you can see the dance that is already there. Prepare your journal. Dedicate a small notebook and call it your Harmony Journal or Witnessing Log. The task of noting every evening before bed. Take a few minutes to write down at least 3 synchronistic or harmonious events that occurred during your day. They don't have to be big miracles. Look for the subtleties. I was just thinking of someone and then they texted me. Got to the bus stop at the exact moment the bus arrived. I needed an answer and I happened to read the perfect quote. Feel the wonder. As you write them down, don't analyze them. Simply feel a little spark of wonder and gratitude. Smile at the elegant arrangement of the universe. Train your vision. By practicing this daily, you are training your brain and your soul to recognize harmony. The more you look for it with an open heart, the more you will see it everywhere. You are learning to become an appreciative audience for the masterful dance of your own life. And you will realize in that peaceful observation that you are not just watching the dance. You are the dance. Chapter 21. The Unmoved Mover, the Power of Inner Gravity. Observe the people at a party. Some talk a lot, move constantly, and try to capture attention. They push their energy outwards, striving to be seen and heard. And then there are others. They might be sitting quietly in a corner, listening intently, completely anchored in their own presence. They aren't trying to impress anyone. But a strange thing happens. People are drawn to them. People seek them out for conversation. People listen carefully when they finally speak. They don't push, they pull. Their peace creates an invisible gravitational field. True power doesn't operate like a sledgehammer. It operates like gravity, a silent presence that causes movement in everything around it. The story of Lyra the woodcarver and the lesson of the ancient oak is a testament to how one can become a center of gravity. Introduction: the striving artist. Lyra was a woodcarver with gifted hands, but a heart full of insecurity. She would bring her creations to the city's bustling market, feeling small before the other merchants. She watched them shout, haggle, and work to convince customers. Believing this was the only way to succeed, she tried to imitate them. The tension, the failure of effort. Every day Lyra stood at her stall and tried to sell. She explained at length the meaning behind each piece. She praised the quality of every grain of wood. She tried to prove the value of her labor, but her words carried the energy of desperation, of a need for validation, and that energy, instead of attracting inadvertently, pushed people away. People would walk by, glance over, and keep walking. Her eagerness seemed to put pressure on them. The more she talked, the less they listened. The more she tried to prove her worth, the more that worth seemed to diminish. She was pushing, and the world was pushing back. The turning point. The lesson from the oak tree. One slow afternoon, in a fit of despair, Lyra sat down and looked toward the ancient oak tree in the center of the market square. The oak did nothing. It didn't boast about its lush canopy. It didn't advertise its cool shade. It simply existed, solid, silent, and full of power, and yet it was the center of the entire market. Children played around its base. Merchants rested against its trunk. Lovers met in its shade. The oak didn't need to move or shout. Its very presence was a magnetic pull. A realization dawned on Lyra. She had been trying to be a noisy hawker when the nature of her soul and her work was that of the ancient oak, the resolution when silence becomes magnetic. The next day, Lyra did something completely different. She didn't say a word. She placed her single, most beautiful sculpture on a simple linen cloth. Then she sat down on a small stool, took out a piece of wood, and began her work. She became completely absorbed in the act of carving, in the scent of the wood, in the movement of her hands. Her stall became an oasis of stillness and focus in the middle of the chaotic market. And then gravity began to work. Drawn by this unusual silence, people began to stop. They didn't feel pressured to buy. They were simply pulled into her field of peaceful, focused energy. They admired the sculpture with care. They watched her hands at work. And then they began to ask questions. Lyra answered gently, briefly, letting the work tell its own story. A wealthy nobleman who had passed her stall dozens of times before stopped. He was impressed not by a sales pitch, but by the quiet confidence that emanated from her and her work. He bought not just one, but all of Lyra's pieces. Lyra had learned the most important lesson: true value doesn't need to be proven. It only needs to be embodied. By doing less, she became more. By saying less, she was heard more completely. As a teacher and a leader, I have also learned this lesson. I used to try to lead by talking a lot, giving long lectures, trying to motivate my team with commands. But that only created passive compliance. True power emerged only when I learned to be silent. I would present a problem, and then I would step back, holding a space for the group's collective wisdom to emerge. My trusting silence became a gravitational pull, drawing the best ideas out of them, instead of pushing my own ideas onto them. The universal law becoming the unmoved mover. The law of inner gravity states, true power does not pursue, it attracts. It does not convince, it is present. When you try to prove your worth, you are implicitly admitting that you doubt it. When you release the need to explain, to defend, to be validated, you activate an ancient power. You become a still center. And just as the sun doesn't need to convince the planets to orbit it, your solid presence will naturally create a gravitational field arranging people and opportunities around you. When you say less, your words carry more weight. When you stop trying to be important, you become indispensable. This is the art of becoming the unmoved mover, still at the center yet causing harmonious movement in everything around you. Practice the oak tree exercise. This is a practice for you to experience the power of inner gravity in your daily life. Identify the situation. Think of an upcoming situation where you tend to talk too much or try too hard. A meeting, a date, a family conversation. Set the oak tree intention. Before entering that situation, take 1 minute to close your eyes. Picture an ancient oak tree or a mountain. Feel its solidity, its silence, and its self-evident presence. Decide, in this situation, I will be the oak tree. Practice conscious reduction. During the interaction, practice the following. Aim to speak about 20% less than you normally would. When others speak, listen with the intent to understand, not to find an opportunity to reply. Before you speak, allow for a small pause. Let your words come from a place of stillness, not from instant reaction. Observe the pull. Don't expect a specific outcome. Simply observe. Do you feel more powerful by trying less? Do others respond to you differently? Does the space of the conversation change? You are learning to shift from pushing energy out to becoming a center that draws energy in. You are learning to use the most efficient and elegant power in the universe, the power of gravity. Chapter 22, Quiet Certainty, When Belief Becomes Truth. Think about your relationship with the sun. You do not wake up each morning and hope the sun will rise. You don't perform rituals or recite affirmations to plead for its appearance. You don't have to. Deep in every cell you possess an absolute, unshakable certainty that the sun will rise. This certainty needs no words, no proof. It is a foundational truth of your existence, and you arrange your entire day around it effortlessly. This is the highest form of trust. This is the state of knowing. And this is the ultimate power of manifestation, a silent state that transcends all prayer. The story of Master Valerius and his final lighthouse is a lesson in the power of this quiet certainty. Introduction, the final test. Many years had passed since Master Valerius, the bridge builder, learned the lesson of flowing with the water. His wisdom had now become legendary. The king gave him one final task, a seemingly impossible challenge to build a lighthouse on Dragon's Tooth Point, a place so notorious for its ferocious storms that no structure had ever survived a single winter. The tension, the noise of logic. All the kingdom's finest engineers and advisors declared the task impossible. They presented Valerius with maps of ocean currents, data on wind speeds, and geological reports. They argued, they analyzed, and they proved with logic that any lighthouse would be torn apart. They urged him to give up. The Valerius of years past would have been drawn into this battle. He would have tried to create a stronger design to argue back with his own logic, feeling the pressure to prove himself right. His mind would have been filled with anxiety and the burden of success. The turning point. The stillness of one who knows. But the Valerius of today was different. He sat in silence, listening to all their arguments and fears with infinite patience. He did not object. He did not defend his intention. When they had said all they had to say, he simply nodded and said softly, "I thank you for your diligence. The work begins next week." In his voice there was no hope, no defiance, and no prayer. There was only a quiet, deep, and immovable certainty. He didn't hope the lighthouse would stand. He knew it would stand, not because he had a perfect design, but because he had become completely one with the outcome on an energetic level. His certainty had already become the structure's strongest foundation. It was already a truth within his soul. The resolution, the manifestation of a truth. The construction began. Valerius did not supervise with tension. He spent most of his time sitting on the shore, doing nothing, simply holding in his heart the image and feeling of the completed lighthouse, a beacon of steadfast, peaceful, eternal light. His quiet certainty became an energetic anchor for the entire project. When small storms hit during construction, the workers panicked, but Valerius remained calm. He saw them as necessary tests to make the foundation even stronger. The lighthouse was completed. That winter, the most terrible storm in a century ravaged the coastline. But as the dawn broke over the wreckage, the lighthouse still stood, its light calmly shining out to sea. It was not merely a structure of stone and mortar, it was the physical manifestation of an unshakable certainty. In our own journeys, we can reach this state. At first, we may need to use affirmations, I am worthy, I am abundant. This is an important step like learning a formula by rote. But the final stage of mastery is when you no longer need to say the words. You no longer have to try to believe you are worthy. You simply know it. The question of your worth doesn't even arise in your mind anymore. It has become a foundational truth, a part of your very breath. And it is that quiet certainty that truly attracts the relationships, opportunities, and respect you once sought. The universal law when you become the truth. We have come on a long journey from letting go to listening to, trusting to acceptance. And all those paths lead to a single peak, an ultimate law. The highest form of manifestation is not the result of what you do, but the natural radiance of who you have become. At this stage, you no longer attract something, because that action still implies separation. Instead, you become it. You don't attract peace. You are peace. You don't attract abundance. You are abundance. And when you become a truth on an energetic level, the universe, that great mirror, has no choice but to rearrange the physical world to reflect that truth back to you. This is not passive waiting. This is active alignment in its most refined and powerful form. Practice the "it is already so" exercise. This is the final practice, a practice of mastery. It is not a technique to be done, but a state to be inhabited. Identify your truth. Choose a desire you have worked with through the previous exercises. Now shift it from a desire to a foundational truth. For example, from "I want to be peaceful" to "I am peace." Release the techniques. Commit that for at least one day you will stop using all techniques related to this truth. No repeating affirmations, no visualizing, no trying to generate feelings. Abide in the knowing. Instead, go through your day with a quiet certainty. Whenever the thought of that truth arises, "I am peace," simply nod internally and acknowledge it. Yes, it is already so. Carry it the way you carry the knowledge that the sun will rise tomorrow. You don't have to think about it constantly, but it is always there as a solid foundational fact. Observe the power of not needing. Notice the peace and power that comes from not needing. You don't need proof. You don't need it to manifest instantly. You don't need external validation. You are at peace in the understanding that it is already a fact in the unseen, and its outer manifestation is merely an inevitable echo in time. Welcome. You are no longer a student of the laws. You have become the law itself. Chapter 23, the no one needs to know principle. Protecting your dreams in silence. Think of the moment a woman first learns she is carrying a new life. In those first, most fragile and precious weeks, an instinctual wisdom often arises. She doesn't rush to announce the news to the whole world. Instead, she holds it as a sacred secret, a quiet joy between herself and her most beloved. This act does not come from fear. It comes from a deep wisdom of protection. She is creating a safe, energetic womb, shielding the new life from the opinions, worries, and energies of the outside world until it is strong and stable enough. Your deepest aspirations, the newly sprouted dreams in your soul, are just as fragile and precious. They need to be protected. The story of Liam the luthier and the lesson of the unnamed lute is a testament to this powerful principle. Introduction: The young craftsman's dream. Liam was a young luthier with a bold vision. He dreamed of creating a new kind of lute, one with a shape and sound never before heard, a sound that could touch the soul. The idea burned in his heart like a pure flame, the tension when a dream is exposed to the wind. With the enthusiasm of youth, Liam believed that sharing his idea would win him support. He brought his designs and concepts before the Council of Master Luthiers, He spoke passionately about his vision, but instead of encouragement, he received skepticism and criticism. "Absurd, that shape will never resonate," said one. "That wood is too soft. It will warp," remarked another. "Don't waste your time on foolish fantasies, young man." Each word was like a cold wind blowing on Liam's fragile seedling. Their energy, based on their own experiences and limitations, began to shake his faith. Doubt crept into his heart. His initial creative energy, instead of being focused, was scattered on defending himself, arguing and trying to prove his point. And the first instruments he made all failed. They were soulless and awkward, just as the masters had predicted. His dream was dying from premature exposure. The turning point, the Blind Musicians' Council. Desperate and on the verge of giving up, Liam sought out an old blind musician who lived as a hermit in the forest. After hearing Liam's story, the musician didn't comment on the lute's design. He only asked one question. When a sparrow builds its nest, does it ask for the eagle's opinion? No. It works in silence, following the deep guidance from within. You have tried to build your nest in the middle of the marketplace. The soul of an instrument is shy. It will not appear amid such noise. The blind musician's words awakened Liam. He realized he had been seeking permission from people who were incapable of seeing what he saw. The resolution, a melody born in silence. Liam returned to his workshop. He didn't say a word to anyone. He hung a thick cloth over the door. His workshop became a sealed space, a secret incubator. He strictly followed the "no one needs to know" principle. In that silence and privacy, he worked. There were no more comments, no more doubts. There was only him, the wood, and his pure intention. His energy was no longer leaking. It was completely focused on the task. He was no longer trying to create a product to prove others wrong. He was allowing a soul to take form. The lute was finally finished. It had a strange and wondrous beauty. That night, instead of taking it to the council, Liam simply sat in the town square and began to play. A melody never before heard rang out. It was deep, carrying a gentle sorrow and a fierce joy. The sound itself was a force. People were drawn from their homes, gathering in silence to listen. They didn't need to know what wood the lute was made of or what shape it had. They only knew that its sound touched a deep place in their hearts. Liam didn't have to say a word. His creation, nurtured in silence, was now strong enough to speak for itself. In my own journey of healing emotional wounds, I have also learned this principle. Talking too much about my process, especially with those who don't truly understand, sometimes did more harm than good. It invited unneeded advice, unintentional judgments, and left the wound exposed. The deepest healing often happens in silence, through journal pages. No one reads through quiet dialogues with myself, through tears shed in private. It is a sacred process, and no one needs to know is the protective fence for that sacredness. The universal law protecting creative energy. This is a practical and powerful law. The most sacred aspirations must be protected in silence so they can accumulate enough power to manifest. Imagine your creative energy is like water held in cupped hands. Every time you talk about your unformed intention, you are opening a finger and a little water leaks out. Words, even well-intentioned ones, dilute the potent energetic field needed for germination. Silence is the act of keeping your fingers tightly closed. It concentrates your power. It creates a safe space, a greenhouse for fragile ideas. The universe does not respond to your loud declarations. It responds to the potent contained energy within you. Treat your dreams like seedlings. Don't rush to show them off in the harsh sun or the strong winds of judgment. Nurture them in the shade of silence until their roots have grown deep and strong. Practice the secret greenhouse exercise. This is a practice to protect your most precious aspirations. Choose your seedling. Identify a dream, a goal, or a new idea that is emerging within you. Something that feels truly precious and perhaps a bit fragile. Build the energetic greenhouse. Make a conscious pact with yourself. For a set period, e.g., 21 days, you will strictly adhere to the no one needs to know principle regarding this topic. You will not speak of it, write about it publicly, or seek opinions or validation from anyone. Take quiet, nurturing action. Your job is to nurture this seedling in secret. Every day, take one small, silent action to water it. If it's a new skill, practice alone for 10 minutes. If it's a project, write one more paragraph. If it's a personal goal, spend time feeling the joy of having already achieved it. Feel the conserved power. Pay attention to how you feel during this process. Instead of feeling lonely, do you begin to feel powerful? As if you are holding a potent secret between you and the universe. Observe how the dream becomes more real and solid to you, without needing any validation from the outside world. You are learning to be the faithful guardian of the gardens of your own soul. And in that protection, the most beautiful flowers will have the chance to bloom. Chapter 24. Peaceful Expectancy. Preparing to receive the miracle. Imagine you are preparing for a cherished guest, a dear friend whom you love deeply, to visit after a long journey. What do? Do you sit motionless by the window, sick with worry, wondering if they are lost, wondering if they will even show up? Of course not. Instead, you engage in a joyful dance of preparation. You tidy the house. You arrange a vase of fresh flowers. You cook their favorite meal, and its fragrance fills the home. You act as if they are nearly there. Your state is not one of anxious wanting, but of peaceful expectancy. And it is this welcoming, joyful, and certain energy that turns your home into a warm sanctuary, a magnet for reunion. This is precisely how the universe responds to your deepest aspirations. The story of Anya and the sailor's promise is a lesson in how to turn waiting into a creative act. Introduction: The Promise Before the Dawn. Anya lived in a small fishing village by the sea. Her heart belonged to Ronan, a young sailor, before he embarked on a long voyage. Before he set sail, he promised her he would return with the first spring tide. Anya lived on that promise, a warm flame of hope in her heart. The tension, the anxious wait. As winter faded and the days of the first spring tide drew near, Anya's flame of hope began to flicker in the winds of fear. She fell into a state of anxious waiting. Every day she would climb the high cliffs, her eyes strained toward the empty horizon. She neglected her small garden. Her cottage grew cold. Her energy was a prayer of lack. Her heart no longer vibrated at the frequency of joyful reunion, but at the frequency of the fear of loss. She wasn't preparing to welcome him home. She was bracing for a tragedy. Day after day the tide rose and fell, but no sign of Ronan's sail appeared. Her rush for him to return now was creating friction, a resistance against the natural flow of time, the turning point. Preparing for a festival. One afternoon, an old woman of the village who had seen countless ships leave and return found Anya weeping on the cliffs. She offered no empty platitudes. She simply placed a hand on the girl's shoulder and said, "You are waiting for him as if he is lost. You must wait for him as if he is on his way home. Go home and prepare a festival, child." Those words, simple yet full of wisdom, awakened Anya. She realized her anxiety wasn't making Ronan's ship sail any faster. It was only pushing her own joy away. She made a decision to change. She stopped going to the cliffs. She went home. The resolution, the welcoming home. Anya began to practice the art of peaceful expectancy. She acted as if Ronan's return was a certainty. She cleaned their small cottage until it sparkled. She planted Ronan's favorite flowers in her garden. She even laid out the finest ingredients to prepare a celebratory meal. She was no longer waiting passively. She was engaging in active alignment. Her energy had shifted. Her home and her entire being no longer radiated lack, but a warm, heartfelt welcome. She had turned her expectation into a state of being. A few days later, as she was humming a tune and tending to her flower beds, A village child came running shouting that a ship was entering the bay. It was Ronan's. He had returned safe and sound. Their reunion was even more joyful and sweet than she had prepared for. Anya understood that she could not control the ocean winds, but she could control the energetic lighthouse in her own heart, turning it into an unmistakable signal of welcome, a place of peace for her love to find his way home to. In my own career, I have learned this lesson. There were times after finishing a major project when I would feel empty and anxious about the next thing. Frantic searching only brought unsuitable opportunities. It was only when I learned to exist in peaceful expectancy that things changed. I would trust that the perfect opportunity was on its way to me. And in the meantime, I would prepare the house. I'd learn a new skill, organize my work, and connect with others from a place of joy instead of desperation. By acting as if the best job had already found me, I became a magnet for it to actually do so. The universal law of vibrational resonance. This is one of the secrets to effortless manifestation. The universe does not respond to your want. It responds to your vibrational resonance. Anxious wanting emits a frequency of lack. In contrast, peaceful expectancy emits a frequency of knowing, certainty, and fullness. When you can hold this energetic state, you are creating a perfect match for the frequency of your desire. This intentional waiting is not passive. It is an act of active alignment. It is you preparing your mind, your heart, and your life as if the best has already arrived. This act of preparation creates a magnetic pull, drawing the reality you desire toward you naturally. Nature never rushes, yet everything is accomplished. Trust in that divine schedule. Practice the prepare the house exercise. This is a joyful and powerful practice to shift you from a state of wanting to a state of receiving. Now identify your cherished guest. Choose a desire you are expecting, an opportunity, a relationship, a change. Picture it as a cherished guest who is on their way. Ask the preparation question. Ask yourself this question. If I knew with 100% certainty that this guest was arriving in the near future, what would I do today to prepare to welcome them? Take a joyful preparatory action. Based on your answer, take one small concrete action with an energy of joy and certainty. If you are expecting a new career opportunity, clean and organize your workspace. If you are expecting love, take time for self-care. Do something that makes you feel truly beautiful and lovable. If you are expecting abundance, clean out your wallet and arrange your bills with respect. Live in the welcoming energy. As you perform this action, truly feel the joy of expectancy. Act as if you are preparing for a celebration that is sure to happen. This practice isn't about making the miracle happen. It's about tuning your energy, turning yourself into a ready, warm, and irresistible home for the good that is to come. Chapter 25. The principle of the outcome. Let your results do the talking. Think about someone's journey with weight loss or fitness. There are two paths. The first is the path of announcement. Day 1. Starting my journey. Determination. Every meal and every workout is documented. The person receives encouragement, advice, and also scrutiny. Their energy is scattered on maintaining the story of their transformation. The second is the path of silence. The person begins their journey quietly. They simply choose a healthier meal, walk a little farther each day. No one knows. There are no progress updates. Months later, a friend sees them and exclaims, "Wow, you look amazing. Something is completely different about you." Those words of discovery from an outsider, carry a weight and a truth that 1,000 self-announcements never could. The result has spoken for itself. The story of Master Elias the alchemist and the lesson of the chrysalis is a testament to this powerful principle. Introduction: the great work. Master Elias did not transmute lead into gold. He transmuted discord into harmony. His entire life he pursued one great work: to transform a common piece of lead ore into a stone of peace, an object capable of radiating a harmonious energy, healing anyone who came near it. This was a sacred alchemical process, demanding an absolute balance of inner and outer elements. The tension, the impatience of the observer. A young and enthusiastic scholar from the capital named Marius was sent to document Elias's work. Marius was obsessed with progress. Every day he would ask, "Master, has it changed yet? Is the color brighter? What ritual did you perform today?" He wanted to announce every small step to the academy, believing this would prove the importance of the work. But Elias remained silent. He performed his tasks, heating, cooling, distilling, in near absolute stillness. He knew that the alchemy of becoming was an incredibly fragile process. To talk about it, measure it, or give updates on it was like opening an alchemical furnace too soon. It would disturb the delicate balance and ruin the entire process. Marius's impatience was creating a supervisory energy, threatening the sacred transformation taking place. The turning point, the lesson from the chrysalis. One night, overcome with curiosity, Marius snuck into Elias's laboratory to see the progress for himself. The slight draft from the open door ruined a crucial distillation process, setting the work back by weeks. Elias found Marius there, but he was not angry. He quietly led the young man to a monarch butterfly's chrysalis hanging on a branch. "A miracle is happening inside there, young man," Elias said. "The caterpillar is becoming something entirely new. If we, out of curiosity, cut open the chrysalis to check on the progress, what would we find? Not a butterfly, a failure. The alchemy of becoming requires a sealed vessel. My silence is that vessel." The resolution, the wordless declaration. Marius finally understood. He stopped asking questions. He learned to sit outside the laboratory in respectful silence, trusting a process he could not see. Months passed in Elias's quiet devotion. One morning he emerged from his laboratory. He said nothing. He simply placed a small, gray, unremarkable stone on a table in the courtyard. At first no one noticed, but then people began to feel it. A profound sense of peace spread across the courtyard. People who were arguing fell silent. Anxious hearts grew calm. The flowers in the garden seemed to lean toward the stone. Its power was undeniable. Elias never needed to announce that he had succeeded. The result spoke for itself, a declaration more eloquent than any words. The discovery by others was the most genuine validation. In our relationships, we can also apply this principle. When you and your partner decide to heal together, do it in silence. Don't tell your friends. We're practicing better communication. Simply communicate better. Be more patient. Listen more deeply. Let the change happen quietly. And then one day a friend will say to you, "You two seem so happy and connected lately." Those words of discovery, are the most authentic proof of your achievement. The universal law, let the results speak. This is the principle of mastery. The universe does not respond to your announcements. It responds to your completed works. Your process of growth is a sacred alchemy. Protect it. Do not expose it to the opinions and energies of the outside world too soon. Talking about a plan turns it into a story to be told. Working in silence turns it into a reality to be lived. Let your change become so obvious it is undeniable. Let your peace become so tangible that others can feel it. Let your achievement speak for itself. That is the most powerful declaration, because it comes not from the ego that wants recognition, but from the truth that has been made manifest. Practice the inner alchemy exercise. This is a practice to protect your transformation process and allow the result to announce itself. Identify your great work. Choose an aspect of yourself or your life that you wish to deeply change or improve. A habit, a skill, a creative project. Seal the laboratory. Make a sacred pact with yourself. You will not give progress updates, complain about difficulties, or boast about small successes in this process to anyone. Consider this your own private alchemy. Dedicate yourself in silence. Focus all your energy on the action, not the talk. Every day, take one small step in stillness. Water your garden without needing to tell the village. Await external discovery. Let go of the need for encouragement or recognition during the process. Your goal is not to convince others that you are changing. Your goal is to change. Trust that when your transformation is complete, it will shine on its own. Wait for the moment someone looks at you and says, "There's something truly different about you." That is the sound of true success. Be the alchemist, not the storyteller. Work in silence and let the world be astonished by the magic you create. Chapter 26. The Art of Sacred Withdrawal. When stepping back is the greatest step forward. Have you ever tried to untangle a knotted necklace? Our instinctive reaction is to focus intently, using pins and fingers trying to pull and pry at each link. But often our tense intervention only makes the knot tighter. Our effort creates more resistance, and then exhausted, we give up. We set the necklace down and go do something else. A while later, when we return with a relaxed mind and fresh eyes, we suddenly see a loop we didn't see before. We gently pull one end and the entire knot releases with ease. The magic didn't happen during our intervention. It happened in the space created by our withdrawal. The story of Abbess Isolde and the conflict between two clans is a lesson in how sometimes the most powerful action is no action at all. Introduction: The Kingdom's Mediator. Abbess Isolde was renowned throughout the land for her wisdom and her ability to resolve the most complex conflicts. Lords and common folk alike sought her out, bringing her their tangled problems, and she could always find a path to harmony with her compassion and insight. The tension. The knot of hatred. But then she faced a challenge that seemed to surpass even her wisdom. Two powerful clans held an ancient, bitter feud over the rights to a forest and a river. The feud had now escalated to the brink of war, threatening the peace of the entire region. Isolde did everything she knew how to do. She organized meetings, she listened, she proposed fair compromises, she drafted treaties. She worked tirelessly, using all her experience to try to untie the knot of hatred. But all her efforts were in vain. The more she tried to control the situation, the more entrenched the two clans seemed to become. Her well-intentioned intervention had unintentionally become the center of the conflict, giving both sides a reason to continue arguing and reacting. She had become part of the knot itself. The turning point. Entrusting it to the divine after weeks of futility, exhausted and feeling her wisdom depleted, Isolde retreated to the abbey's chapel. She intended to pray for more strength for another solution, but as she knelt, a deeper truth came to her. She had been trying to do the work of the divine. She had been trying to control a current that had a wisdom of its own. And so she did something no one could have expected. She sent a short message to both clans. It read, "I have done all that I can. I now withdraw completely from this matter and entrust it to the judgment of the divine. May it guide you both." This was not an act of failure. It was an act of ultimate faith. She had consciously withdrawn her energy, her anxiety, and her control from the problem. She had created a vacuum. The resolution. A space for miracles. For the first few days, nothing happened. The two clans, now without a mediator to complain to or react against, were left alone with their own hatred. The silent space Isolde had created forced them to face themselves. And then the miracle happened, not in a council room, but in the disputed forest itself. The youngest son of one clan, while out hunting, fell and twisted his ankle. And the person who found him was none other than the matriarch of the other clan, who was out gathering herbs. In that moment, there were no advisors, no treaties, no presence of Isolde. There was only a person in pain and another person with compassion. She helped the boy, a simple act of human kindness, and that small act began to unravel a knot that centuries of hatred had tied. When the news spread, the hardness in both clans began to melt. They approached each other on their own, not to argue but to offer thanks. The solution came not from Isolde's intervention, but from her sacred withdrawal. She had created an empty space, and the universe had filled it with a miracle. When I face a creative block, a blank page that refuses to be filled, I have learned this same lesson. The more I try to force it, the more intimidating the page becomes. But when I consciously withdraw, I put down the pen, go outside, and declare, I am not working on this problem today. I create space. And often, the best idea comes to me while I'm washing dishes or taking a walk, when my mind is no longer trying to control it. The universal law, the divine, awaits your withdrawal. Ultimate power does not lie in constant intervention. The universe has an intelligence and an organizing capacity far beyond our limited vision. Often it is our own efforts to control our micromanaging and our anxiety that are standing in the way of the very solution that is trying to reach us. Conscious withdrawal is not an abdication of responsibility. It is an act of the deepest faith. It's when you acknowledge, I don't know the answer, but I trust that a higher intelligence does. Your withdrawal does not create a void. It creates a sacred space for miracles to occur, for problems to dissolve on their own, and for solutions to emerge from the most unexpected directions. Your intervention can be the obstacle. Your withdrawal can be the invitation. Practice the ritual of surrender through withdrawal. This is a powerful practice to use when you feel stuck on an intractable problem. Identify the knot. Recognize a problem in your life where your efforts only seem to be making things worse. Declare your conscious withdrawal. Find a quiet place. Say aloud with a gentle firmness, with this issue I have done all that I know how to do. I now consciously withdraw. I retract my energy, my anxiety, and my need to control from this situation. The act of entrusting. Write the problem on a small piece of paper, fold it up, hold it in your hands and say, I entrust this knot to the infinite wisdom of the universe. The divine knows what I do not. I trust that a perfect solution will form on its own. Put the problem away. Place the piece of paper in a box, a drawer, or somewhere out of sight. This act symbolizes that you are truly setting the problem aside. Commit that for a set period, e.g., 3 days, you will not actively think about or act to solve it. If the thought of it arises gently, remind yourself, I have withdrawn. This is being taken care of. Allow yourself to rest. Allow yourself to not know the answer, and watch to see what magic seeps into the space you have so bravely created. Chapter 27. The Command of Stillness. When your presence becomes authority, think of a panic in a crowd. As fear spreads, it creates a chaotic energy, sweeping everyone into a vortex of mindless action and screaming. In that situation, a person who tries to shout louder than the crowd will often only worsen the chaos. Their words are drowned out. But sometimes there is one person who simply stands still. They do not shout. They do not give orders. They just stand there, completely still, an oasis of peace in the storm. That presence has a strange power. At first no one notices, but then the energy of that stillness begins to radiate. Those nearest to them feel it and slow down. That calm spreads like ripples. The crowd, having found a still point of reference, begins to regain its sanity. That person did nothing, yet their presence issued a command for the chaos to subside. This final story is about King Theron. In the moment he demonstrated the highest form of authority, the power of stillness. Introduction: The Still King. King Theron was now known throughout the lands not as Theron the Great or Theron the Valiant, but as Theron the Still. It was said that his presence could calm the storms in people's hearts, and that his silence carried more weight than 1,000 words. His kingdom reflected that peace. The tension, The command of chaos. One afternoon during a midsummer festival, a fire broke out fiercely in the capital's central market. Panic erupted. The crowd screamed, shoved, and ran aimlessly. The city guards, though brave, were swallowed by the sea of chaos. All their orders were lost to the shrieks and the roar of the flames. The chaos was feeding on itself. The king's advisors rushed to his side, urging him to act. "Your Majesty, give the order. Send in the army. Do something." They wanted him to use his authority to impose order on the chaos. The turning point. The king's presence. King Theron listened to them, but he looked not at the chaos in the market. He looked at the chaos in the eyes of his own advisors. And then he did something no one expected. He issued no command. He simply rose and began to walk. He walked slowly, deliberately toward the market square that was sinking in fire and panic. He carried no sword. He brought no guards. He brought only his stillness. He walked to the steps of a temple on the edge of the square, a place from which all could be seen, and he just stood there, silent, solid as a mountain. He was not trying to do anything. He was simply being. He became an anchor of peace in an ocean of fear. His being, the stillness he had cultivated over many years, had become a wordless command. The resolution when stillness commands reality. At first, no one noticed the king, but the energy field of peace he radiated had a physical power. The frantic people running nearest to him suddenly slowed. They didn't know why, but the sharpest edge of their panic softened. That calm, like ripples, began to spread further out. Gradually, the crowd stopped screaming. They looked toward the still figure on the temple steps. The king's silence was more resonant than the roar of the fire. As the noise of panic subsided, the guards' orders could finally be heard. People began to calm down, working together in an orderly fashion to put out the fire. The blaze was finally extinguished. The king had not issued a single order yet. His presence had saved the city. He did not fight the chaos. He commanded it to subside with the very frequency of his being. His ultimate authority lay not in the crown on his head, but in the stillness in his heart. In our daily lives, when faced with an angry person, our instinct is to defend or counterattack with words, but that only adds fuel to the fire. Try just once to simply stand still and listen. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of solidity. Maintain an unshakable inner peace. Often the angry person with nothing to push against will automatically de-escalate. Their nervous system subconsciously responds to your powerful signal of peace. Your stillness has become a command. The universal law embodiment is the ultimate authority. This is one of the most profound and powerful truths. Your true power of influence comes not from what you do or what you say. It comes from who you have become. When you cultivate a state of deep inner peace, your very presence becomes a force with a magnetic pull. The outer world, including people and circumstances, will unconsciously rearrange itself around your stillness. Your frequency is the most powerful signal you broadcast. True authority does not come from assertion. It comes from embodiment. When you embody peace, you automatically become a leader. When you embody certainty, your words automatically carry weight. You do not need to command the outer world. You need only command your inner world, and the outer world will follow. Your calm is your command. Practice the anchor exercise. This is a practice for you to bring this power of energetic command into your own life. Identify the turbulent waters. Think of an upcoming situation that is likely to be stressful or chaotic, a meeting, a difficult conversation, rush hour traffic. Activate your inner anchor. Before entering the situation, take 1 minute. Close your eyes. Bring your attention to the center of your chest. Imagine a heavy, steady ball of light there. This is the anchor of your inner peace. Feel its weight and its stillness. Drop anchor in the storm. When you are in the situation and you feel the chaotic energy beginning to rise, bring a part of your awareness back to this inner anchor. Do not try to change the other person. Do not try to control their words. Your only task is to maintain your connection to your inner stillness. Let your being become the most peaceful presence in that space. Observe the ripples. Just observe. Expect nothing. Notice if your inner stillness creates any subtle shift in the atmosphere. You are practicing the art of commanding reality, not with force, but with the very frequency of your being. You are the lighthouse. Don't try to calm the storm. Just stand firm and shine, and the ships will find their own way to the peaceful harbor. Chapter 28. Invisible Mastery when power becomes as natural as breath. Think of a master sound engineer at a concert. When they do their job perfectly, you are completely unaware of their existence. The music is crystal clear, the vocals are distinct, and the emotion is transmitted flawlessly. Their work is entirely invisible. You only notice them when something goes wrong, a screech of feedback, an imbalance in the mix. The sound engineer's ultimate mastery lies in becoming transparent, allowing the music to flow through them without leaving a trace. Spiritual power at its highest level operates in precisely the same way. It is not a performance. It is an essential, powerful, and completely invisible presence like the air we breathe. The story of Silas the royal gardener is a final lesson in how to become an invisible force of harmony. Introduction: The Silent Gardener. For 50 years, Silas had tended the royal gardens. He was a quiet, humble, and often forgotten man. The lords and ladies would stroll through the gardens, marveling at the vibrant blooms and the serene atmosphere, but they rarely noticed the one who created it all. They attributed the beauty to the fertile soil or the favorable weather, the tension, the challenge of the visible. A new young king ascended the throne. The king was a man of action, of great monuments and visible achievements. He wanted to renovate the garden, to turn it into a symbol of his power. He summoned famous landscape architects from afar with their complex drawings of grand fountains, geometric topiaries, and exotic, colorful flowers. They saw Silas's simple garden as outdated, and they saw him as an old gardener who needed to be replaced. They could not see his power because it was completely invisible. The turning point: the absence of resistance. Faced with the threat of his life's work being dismantled, Silas did nothing. He did not protest. He did not argue. He did not try to explain his philosophy of gardening. To do so would have been an attempt to make his invisible power visible, and that would have diminished it. He simply agreed to assist the new architects. But as he worked, his mastery operated on another level. He didn't just work with soil and plants. He worked with energy. He held within himself a state of pure harmony with the land. He became a vessel of peace. The resolution, the miracle of invisibility. And then strange things began to happen. The exotic seeds the architects brought would not sprout, as if the land itself were gently refusing them. Their complex fountain designs repeatedly ran into unforeseen underground springs, stalling construction. Meanwhile, in a forgotten corner of the garden that Silas still quietly tended, a miracle unfolded. The native wildflowers suddenly bloomed with an extraordinary vigor, creating a breathtaking and vibrant tapestry of color. They attracted countless rare butterflies and birds, creating a scene so beautiful and harmonious that it made the architect's complex drawings look garish. The young king, taking a walk to relieve his frustration over the delayed projects, was unintentionally drawn to that corner. Sitting amidst the wildflowers, the king felt a profound peace he had never known, and in that moment he understood. True beauty came not from imposition, but from permission. He sent the architects home and asked only one thing of Silas: to simply continue his work. The king had learned that the greatest power is not that which can be seen. Silas never had to prove his worth. The harmony he embodied spoke for itself in a way that was undeniable. His mastery had become so perfect that it had merged with nature itself. In our deepest relationship with ourselves, this mastery is also the final goal. At first, we may need techniques and exercises to find peace, but at a certain point, we no longer need them. Peace is no longer something we practice, but who we are. It becomes invisible. It is the very ground upon which we live, breathe, and act. We no longer try to be happy or peaceful. We simply are, and the influence of that state spreads silently into every aspect of our lives. The universal law becoming one with the flow. The spiritual journey ultimately leads us to a beautiful truth. Ultimate mastery is not about controlling reality. It is becoming so one with reality that the distinction between you and the flow disappears. You are no longer the one trying to swim with the current. You are the current, like the air that sustains life, like the gravity that holds the planets together. Your power becomes essential, potent, and utterly invisible. You need no recognition because you are no longer separate from the whole. Your work is most powerful when no one is watching, because then it is a pure resonance between you and the universe. The final step on this path is to quietly acknowledge your own invisible power, not with ego, but with a humble gratitude. Practice the invisible recognition exercise. This is the practice of one who has arrived, a quiet contemplation of one's own power. Recall the harmony. At the end of each day, gently recall a moment, however small, when things seem to unfold with smoothness and ease. A conversation that flowed, an unexpected solution that appeared, a feeling of peace for no reason. Ask the mastery question. Instead of attributing it to luck, quietly ask yourself, what inner state of being in me allowed for this harmony to unfold? What invisible energy of mine contributed to this ease? Acknowledge in silence, allow yourself a private smile, a recognition that is for you alone. Say in your heart, I recognize my silent power in that moment. I am grateful. Release the analysis. Do not try to analyze or replicate it. The act of recognition is enough. This practice is not for building power. It is for acknowledging the power that has always been a part of you, a power that works most effectively when it goes unnoticed. This is true mastery, not a performance of power, but a silent embodiment of power itself. Chapter 29. The Supreme Action of Non-Action. Think about learning to float on water. At first, your instinct is to struggle. You kick your feet, you wave your arms, you try to use force to keep your head from sinking. But that strained effort only makes you more tired and causes you to sink faster. The moment you truly float is the moment you stop struggling. You lean back, you let go, you take a deep breath, and you trust that the water will support you. In that state of stillness and trust, you are held up effortlessly. The most powerful action to keep from sinking is to do nothing at all. This is one of the deepest lessons the universe teaches us. Sometimes the supreme action is non-action. This final story is about the last hours of King Theron and the greatest lesson he ever left his kingdom. Introduction: The Still King's Farewell. King Theron was now very old and frail. His kingdom, built on the foundation of inner peace, was living in a state of harmony. But the king's weakness was seen by a warlike lord in a neighboring land. He saw it as an opportunity. The tension. The call to action. A massive army gathered at the border, ready for what they believed would be an easy invasion. News flew to the capital and panic spread. The generals and ministers all knelt at the king's bedside, begging him to issue a command. Your Majesty, let us summon the army. Let us build defenses. Please act before it's too late. Everyone and all of logic screamed for action. They wanted the king to do something to fight the threat. The pressure to act, to fight, was immense. The turning point, the supreme non-action. King Theron lay on his bed, his breath faint. He listened to all their pleas, all their fears. He looked at his granddaughter, the future queen, who stood beside him with tears in her eyes. And then he did something no one could understand. He gave no order. He asked everyone to leave, keeping only his granddaughter with him. He took her hand, and then he closed his eyes. He did not pray. He did not meditate. He did not try to send peaceful energy. He was beyond all of that. He simply was. He abided in a state of absolute stillness, of complete acceptance of what is, including the threat of an invasion. He had stepped aside in total trust and allowed life itself to operate through him. It was the ultimate act of faith. It was sacred non-action, the resolution when the universe intervenes. As the king rested in that stillness, a strange event occurred at the border. A thick, cold fog, unseen in this season, suddenly rolled down from the mountains, blanketing the entire enemy encampment. The fog lasted for days. The mighty army was disoriented. They couldn't see each other, couldn't coordinate. Fear and superstitious rumors began to spread. The soldiers believed it was a bad omen, that the land itself was protecting its king. Their morale collapsed. The warlike lord, helpless against an invisible enemy, was finally forced to order a chaotic retreat. The kingdom was saved, not by an army, but by a fog. Not by an action, but by non-action. King Theron did not create the fog, but his supreme act of letting go, his total stillness, had created the perfect space for the universe to perform its own miracle. Before he drew his last breath, he had taught his successor and his entire kingdom the most powerful lesson of all: the strongest action sometimes is to do nothing at all. We all experience this lesson every night when trying to fall asleep. The more you try to sleep, the more sleep evades you. The more you worry about not sleeping, the more awake you become. Sleep is not an achievement to be won through effort. It only arrives when you stop trying. When you let go, when you accept your state of wakefulness and simply lie still, sleep gently comes to you. Every night, the universe teaches us the lesson of the power of non-action, the universal law allowing life to work through you. Our journey has led us here to the ultimate and simplest truth. The supreme action is not an act of the hands, but a stillness of the soul. Wisdom, insight, and the perfect solutions already exist within you and all around you. They are not waiting for your effort to emerge. They are waiting only for you to be still enough to listen. When you stop trying to orchestrate everything, when you step aside and allow life to work through you, you align yourself with a power far greater than your own. To consciously do nothing is not laziness. It is an act that requires tremendous trust. It is a declaration that says, I trust the wisdom of the universe more than my own limited understanding. You do not have to work for the universe to function. You only need to be still enough to get out of its way. Practice the supreme practice, to simply be. This is the final practice, a return to the most primal state. It is not a technique to be done, but a state to abide in. Release all goals. Find a moment in your day, not to meditate, not to heal, not to manifest anything. Consciously release all of those goals. Simply be. Sit down comfortably. Do not try to control your breath. Do not try to watch your thoughts. Let go of all effort. Simply be aware of the truth. I am here. I exist. Abide in goallessness. Remain in this state of goallessness for a few minutes. There is nothing to achieve, nothing to fix, nowhere else to be. This is pure presence. Sense the perfect functioning. In this state of being, gently notice that the universe is functioning perfectly without your intervention. Your heart is beating on its own. Your breath is moving on its own. The planets are turning on their own. This is the final profound recognition that you are part of a great intelligence. And your greatest power comes from allowing that intelligence to flow through you unimpeded. Chapter 30. The final remembrance. You are the power you were seeking. Have you ever frantically searched for your glasses, turning the house upside down in a state of frustration and worry, only to finally discover they were on your head the whole time? Or when you've madly looked for your phone only to realize you are holding it in your hand? In those moments, we feel a silly sense of relief. The thing we were desperately seeking was never lost. The very act of searching prevented us from realizing it was there all along. The spiritual journey in its deepest essence is just like that. It is not a search, it is a remembrance. This final story is about a prince and the treasure he spent his life searching for. A story to remember. Once upon a time, a young prince lived in a magnificent palace, but he always felt that something was missing. He heard the elders speak of a legendary treasure, a heart stone that was said to contain the source of all power and joy in the world. Believing this treasure must be in some faraway land, the prince bade farewell to his palace and began the journey of a lifetime. He traveled far and wide. He met a blacksmith who taught him the power of stillness in the heart of the fire. He met a knight who taught him the courage of letting go of control. He met a winemaker who taught him that the Creator's energy infuses the creation. He met a bridge builder who taught him to flow with the current instead of fighting it. He met a weaver, an alchemist, a king. Each person, each story gave him a piece of the truth. Many years passed, and the prince was now a wise old man with silver hair and a peaceful heart. Finally, he sought out a hermit on the highest mountain for the last clue. The hermit smiled and gave him an old map. With a sense of excitement, the old man followed the map. The path led him on a long journey through familiar lands and finally back to the very kingdom he had left as a young man. The map led him into his old palace through the familiar corridors and stopped before a small forgotten room in the highest tower. Inside there was a simple wooden box. With trembling hands he opened the box, and there on a velvet cloth was the heartstone. It did not sparkle as he had imagined. It was just an ordinary-looking stone, but it radiated a gentle warmth. As he lifted it and pressed it to his chest, he realized something miraculous. The pulse of the stone was in perfect harmony with the beat of his own heart. And in that moment he understood everything. The stone had no power of its own. It was merely a mirror. It reflected back all the strength, peace, and wisdom that he himself had cultivated throughout his journey. The treasure was never in the stone. The treasure was the man he had become. He didn't need to leave the palace to find it, but he needed the entire journey to remember that he had always been a king, even when he was just a prince who was searching. And you, my fellow traveler, are just like that prince. This book, with all its stories and lessons, was not meant to teach you anything new. It is only a map to guide you back home to yourself. The power you were seeking was never lost. It was only temporarily obscured by the layers of dust of doubt, fear, and the mistaken belief that you had to do something to be worthy. You are not a separate entity trying to connect to power. You are an expression of cosmic power. You are a wave in the ocean of life. Your strength needs no proof, just as your joy needs no reason. It is your natural state. The universal law, the journey is over. And this is the final truth, a truth you can rest in. The journey is over because it never truly began. You have always been at the destination. All you need to do is remember. Remember the peace that has always been there beneath the waves of thought. Remember the strength that has always been there beneath the shells of self-doubt. Remember that you are already whole and you need nothing from the outside world to complete you. The final practice is not about achieving anything, but about resting in the truth that has always been. Practice the final act, resting in the truth. This is not an exercise to do. This is a moment to be. Find a quiet moment right now or at the end of your day. Find a moment for yourself. Place a hand on your heart. Place a hand over your heart. Feel its beat, the rhythm of life that has always been there without your permission. Whisper the words of remembrance. Say these words not as an affirmation to convince, but as an acknowledgement of an old truth. The power is within me. It has always been here, and it is enough. Rest now, simply rest. Rest in that truth. There is nothing more to do. There is nothing more to seek. Welcome home.